The night Vanessa Hale's black Mercedes pulled into Mason Reed's dying garage, she had exactly 3 minutes before her courage ran out. 3 minutes to tell the grease-stained mechanic with tired eyes that she'd spent 17 years building a billion-dollar empire to forget him. 3 minutes before the rain washed away her last chance at the truth. She failed. But what she whispered instead, standing under flickering fluorescent lights that smelled like motor oil and regret, would shatter both their carefully constructed lives. This is their story. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and hit that like button so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The overhead door of Reed's auto repair rattled like it might finally give up and collapse, which would have been fitting since Mason Reed felt about the same way. 10:15 on a Thursday night, and he was still elbow deep in Mrs. Patterson's Civic, trying to coax another year out of a transmission that should have been retired when Obama was still president. His back hurt. His hands were black with grease he'd never fully wash out. And somewhere across town, his 6-year-old son Tommy was probably giving his sister hell about bedtime because Dad wasn't there to settle things. Again, Mason straightened up, pressing his fist into his lower back until something popped. The garage was freezing. The ancient space heater had died last winter, and he hadn't found the money to replace it. Rain hammered the metal roof in waves, the kind of October storm that came screaming down from the mountains and turned Ashford streets into rivers. He should go home. The thought had barely formed when headlights swept across the rain-streaked windows, bright and expensive-looking. Mason frowned. Nobody came to this part of town at this hour unless they were lost or desperate. The car that pulled into his lot was neither lost nor desperate. It was a Mercedes S-Class, black and gleaming even through the downpour, the kind of vehicle that cost more than his entire mortgage. It rolled to a stop just outside the garage entrance, headlights cutting through the rain like accusations. Mason grabbed a shop towel and wiped his hands, already running through explanations for why he couldn't help. High-end cars needed high-end shops with high-end equipment. All he had was determination and duct tape. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out, and Mason's heart, which had been beating the same tired rhythm for the last 5 years, suddenly forgot what it was doing. Even through the rain, even in the dim light, he knew her, would have known her anywhere. The way she moved, careful and controlled, the tilt of her head when she looked at something uncertain, the shape of her, tall and lean, wrapped in a coat that probably cost what he made in 3 months. Vanessa Hale. She ran toward the garage, heels clicking on concrete, one arm raised against the rain. Mason's brain finally caught up with his body, and he hit the button to raise the overhead door. It groaned upward, slow as always, while Vanessa ducked under it and into the fluorescent-lit space. "Sorry," she said, slightly breathless. "I didn't mean to. I saw your lights on, and I thought—" She stopped, looked up, recognized him. The change in her expression was microscopic, a fractional widening of her eyes, a pause in her breath. But Mason saw it because he'd spent 4 years of high school learning to read those micro-expressions, back when noticing Vanessa Hale was both his favorite and most painful hobby. "Mason?" His name came out soft, disbelieving. "Hey, Vanessa." His voice sounded normal, which was impressive considering his pulse was trying to jackhammer through his chest. She looked different, older, obviously. They were both 32 now, light years from the kids they'd been. But it was more than that. She looked sharper somehow, like life had filed her down to her essential edges. Her dark hair was shorter, cut in a sleek style that probably had a French name. Her eyes, green as he remembered, carried shadows that hadn't been there before. She was beautiful in a way that made his grease-stained garage feel even smaller. "I can't believe—" she started, then shook her head, rain droplets scattering. "Sorry, I'm dripping all over your floor." "Floor's seen worse." He gestured vaguely at the oil stains that had been there since his dad ran the place. "What happened to your car?" Vanessa glanced back at the Mercedes like she'd forgotten it existed. The engine light came on about 10 miles back, started making this clicking sound. "I pulled off the highway and ended up here." A slight grimace. "I was trying to get to Portland tonight." Portland was another 2 hours north. In this weather, in the dark, with a car making ominous noises. Mason felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with seeing her again and everything to do with the fact that she could have ended up stranded on some mountain road in the middle of nowhere. "Let me take a look," he said. He expected her to hesitate. Rich people didn't trust small-town mechanics, especially not garages that looked like they were held together with rust and prayer. But Vanessa just nodded and handed him the key fob. "Thank you." Mason pulled the Mercedes into the bay next to Mrs. Patterson's Civic. The contrast was almost funny, like parking a racehorse next to a mule. He popped the hood and immediately saw the problem. Loose serpentine belt, probably damaged by road debris. Easy fix, 30 minutes max. Behind him, Vanessa's heels clicked softly on the concrete. She'd taken off her coat, revealing a gray suit that fit her like it had been made specifically for her body, which it probably had been. "Is it bad?" she asked. "Nah, belt came loose. I can fix it tonight if you want to wait, or I can have it ready tomorrow morning." "Tonight." The word came out too quick, almost urgent. She cleared her throat. "I mean, if that's not too much trouble, I'd rather not." "It's fine," Mason said. "Make yourself comfortable. There's coffee in the office, but I can't promise it's any good." He didn't look at her as he said it. Couldn't. Because if he looked at her, really looked, he'd have to acknowledge what was happening in his chest. That strange, painful expansion of something he'd spent years trying to compress into nothing. Vanessa Hale was standing in his garage. The girl he'd been half in love with since sophomore year. The girl who'd never looked at him twice. Except that wasn't quite true, was it? Mason focused on the engine, letting his hands do familiar work while his mind spun backward. He'd been a different person in high school, starting linebacker, decent grades, popular enough. And Vanessa had been Vanessa. Brilliant and weird and completely self-contained. She'd sit in the back of every class reading books that weren't on the syllabus, and occasionally say something so smart it made their teachers blink. He'd noticed her immediately. But guys like him didn't talk to girls like her. That was the rule. Unspoken, but absolute. So he just watched and wondered and told himself it didn't matter. "You took over your dad's place," Vanessa said behind him. Mason glanced back. She was perched on a stool near the workbench, looking around the garage with an expression he couldn't read. "Yeah, about 7 years ago." "How is he?" "Died 6 years ago. Heart attack." "Oh." Her face shifted, something genuine breaking through the polished surface. "Mason, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "No reason you would have." He turned back to the engine, using a socket wrench to loosen the belt tensioner. "You've been busy building an empire and all that." The words came out more bitter than he intended. He heard it, winced internally, but couldn't take it back. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain and the metallic sounds of his work. "You know about that," Vanessa said finally. Not a question. "Kind of hard not to. You're on magazine covers at the grocery store." Mason pulled the damaged belt free, examined it in the light, definitely shot. "Tech Vance, right? Cloud infrastructure or something?" "Cloud-based enterprise solutions." A pause. "But yeah, basically." He had a replacement belt in stock, thank God for small favors. Mason grabbed it from the parts shelf and started threading it through the pulley system. "Seems like it's going well." "It is." "Good. That's good." Another silence, more awkward than the first. Mason focused on the belt, making sure it seated properly in each groove. His hands were steady, even though his pulse wasn't. "What about you?" Vanessa asked. "The town gossips probably kept me updated, but I'd rather hear it from you." Mason's hands paused for just a second. Town gossips. Right. Which meant she knew. "Got married young," he said, keeping his voice level. "Had a son. Wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. Now it's just me and Tommy." He tested the belt tension, satisfied with the resistance. "Nothing as exciting as Forbes magazine." "Mason, I didn't mean it like that." He straightened up, finally meeting her eyes. "Sorry, it's been a long day and I'm running on maybe 4 hours of sleep." Vanessa was looking at him with an expression that made something twist in his gut. Sympathy, but not pity. Like she understood about long days and not enough sleep and the weight of carrying things alone. "I heard about your divorce," Mason said, "because apparently tonight was the night for uncomfortable truths. Last year, right?" Her laugh was sharp and humorless. "The gossips really do reach everywhere. Small town. People talk. People always talk." She slid off the stool, moved closer to the car, close enough that Mason could smell her perfume underneath the rain, something subtle and expensive that made his garage smell even more like oil and desperation. Especially about women who make the mistake of marrying their college boyfriend and expecting him to be okay with her success. There was a story there, jagged edges barely concealed. Mason wanted to ask, but didn't have the right. They weren't friends. Weren't anything really, except two people who'd once gone to the same high school and somehow ended up in the same garage on the same rainy night. He lowered the hood, wiped his hands on the shop towel. "You're all set. Belt's tight. Should run fine. How much do I owe you?" 40 for the belt, 60 for labor. Vanessa pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times. "I'm sending you 500. Don't argue." "Vanessa, you stayed open late. You fixed it immediately, and you're probably exhausted." Her green eyes met his, direct and unflinching. "Take the money, Mason." He wanted to argue. Pride demanded it. But pride didn't pay for Tommy's school supplies or keep the heat running or fix the dozen things wrong with the garage. So he nodded. "Thanks." She smiled, small and sad. "You're welcome." Vanessa walked toward the Mercedes, keys in hand, and Mason felt the moment preparing to end. She'd get in her car, drive away, and he'd never see her again. Back to her world of boardrooms and private jets, back to his world of oil changes and custody schedules. The overhead door was still open, rain visible beyond it like a curtain. Vanessa stopped beside the driver's door, stood there for a long moment, hand on the handle. "I used to watch you," she said quietly. Mason's brain stuttered. "What?" "In high school." She wasn't looking at him, eyes fixed on something in the middle distance. "During lunch, you'd sit with your friends at that table near the gym. Wednesdays, you always bought the pizza, even though it was terrible. And you'd laugh at something Jake said and your whole face would change." His heart was doing something complicated and painful. "Vanessa, I had the biggest crush on you." The words tumbled out fast like she was ripping off a bandage. "Sophomore, junior, senior year. I'd write your name in my notebook margins and then scribble it out because I was terrified someone would see. And I'd plan these elaborate scenarios where you'd notice me, really notice me, and we'd have some profound conversation and you'd realize I existed." Mason couldn't breathe. "But you never did," Vanessa continued, her voice quieter now. "Or I thought you didn't. And then graduation happened, and you went to state college, and I went to MIT, and I told myself it was better that way. Easier, that I'd imagined the whole thing." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been just the reflection of the fluorescent lights. "I built everything I have trying to forget about the boy who never looked at me twice," Vanessa said. "And it worked, mostly. Except on nights like this when the rain sounds the way it did senior year and I remember exactly how it felt to want something I couldn't have." The garage was completely silent, except for the rain and Mason's pulse hammering in his ears. He should say something, anything, but his throat had closed up and his brain was stuck on an infinite loop of "she loved me. She loved me. She loved me." Vanessa shook her head sharply like she was waking up from something. "I'm sorry. That was incredibly inappropriate. You don't need some random woman from high school dumping her teenage feelings on you at 10:30 at night. Vanessa, thank you for fixing my car." She pulled the door open, slid into the driver's seat with practiced efficiency. "It was good seeing you, Mason. Really." The engine purred to life, expensive and smooth. Mason's feet finally remembered how to move. He crossed to the car before she could put it in gear, put his hand on her window. She rolled it down, looking up at him with guarded eyes. "I noticed you," he said roughly, "every single day." Vanessa went very still. "I noticed when you switched from glasses to contacts junior year," Mason continued, words spilling out like he'd been holding them back for 17 years. "I noticed when you got your hair cut short before winter formal. I noticed that you always bought the same lunch, turkey sandwich, apple, black coffee, and you'd eat it while reading whatever book you'd brought that week." Her breath caught audibly. "I noticed you wore this green sweater on Fridays that matched your eyes. And I noticed when you stopped wearing it after Christmas because someone probably said something stupid about you wearing the same thing every week." His hand tightened on the car door. "I noticed everything about you, Vanessa. I just didn't have the guts to do anything about it." The rain was getting louder, or maybe that was just his blood rushing in his ears. "I was an idiot," Mason said. "A coward. I told myself you were too smart, too focused, too everything. That you'd never want some jock who barely scraped through AP English, so I just watched you from across the cafeteria and wished I was braver. Vanessa's hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles had gone white. And then you left, Mason finished quietly. And I told myself it was fine, that I'd get over it. And I did, mostly. Got married, had Tommy, built a life. But I never forgot about the girl who read Dostoevsky during lunch and probably didn't know I existed. I knew, Vanessa whispered. Every time you looked at me, I knew. The air between them felt electric, charged with 17 years of might-have-beens. Mason leaned down, close enough to see the exact shade of her eyes, close enough to smell her perfume mixing with rain, close enough to make a choice that would either be the bravest or stupidest thing he'd done in years. Have dinner with me, he said. Vanessa's eyes went wide. What? Dinner, tomorrow night. There's a place on Main Street that makes decent pasta, and we could talk about something other than high school and regrets. His heart was trying to escape his chest. What do you say? For a long moment, she just stared at him. Mason could see her brain working, see the conflict playing out behind those green eyes. All the reasons this was a terrible idea, all the ways it could go wrong. Then something in her expression shifted, softened. Okay, Vanessa said. Okay? Okay. A real smile now, the first one he'd seen all night. Tomorrow night, Main Street. Mason stepped back from the car, suddenly aware he was grinning like an idiot and completely unable to stop. Vanessa pulled out of the garage, taillights disappearing into the rain. Mason stood there watching until he couldn't see them anymore, until there was nothing but darkness and water and the sound of his own breathing. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister. Tommy's asleep finally. Where are you? Mason looked around his garage. The oil stains, the ancient equipment, the Civic he still needed to finish, the life he'd built from scraps and determination, and the quiet acceptance that some things just weren't meant to be. Maybe he'd been wrong about that. He grabbed his keys, turned off the lights, and headed home through the rain, already counting the hours until tomorrow night. Ika. The next morning came too early and felt too bright, like the universe was compensating for the previous night's storm. Mason woke up to Tommy jumping on his bed, 6 years of pure energy concentrated into 45 pounds of chaos. Dad, Dad, Dad! Aunt Sarah made pancakes and they have chocolate chips, Mason groaned, pulled a pillow over his face. What time is it? 7:30? You slept late. 7:30 was not late by any reasonable definition, but try explaining that to a first grader who thought staying in bed past sunrise was basically a sin. All right. Mason sat up, ruffled Tommy's hair. Go tell Aunt Sarah I'll be down in 5. Tommy rocketed out of the room like he'd been launched from a cannon. Mason heard him thundering down the stairs, followed by Sarah's laugh and a comment about inside voices, please. Mason's sister had moved in after Jen died, temporarily at first, then permanently when it became clear Mason couldn't handle full-time single parenthood and keep the garage running. She worked remotely for some tech company, which meant she could watch Tommy during the day, and Mason could work without worrying about daycare costs he couldn't afford. He owed her everything, and she refused to let him pay her back. Mason showered quickly, threw on jeans and a clean shirt, and headed downstairs. The kitchen smelled like coffee and sugar, a combination that made his morning substantially better. You look tired, Sarah said, sliding a mug across the counter to him. Worked late. How late? Mason took a long drink of coffee before answering. Got home around 11:30. Sarah gave him the look, the one that said she was 4 years younger but still considered herself the responsible sibling. Mrs. Patterson's Civic again? That and... Mason hesitated. Vanessa Hale's Mercedes. The kitchen went quiet. Tommy was focused on his pancakes, drowning them in syrup with the single-minded intensity only children possess. But Sarah was staring at Mason like he'd just announced he was joining the circus. Vanessa Hale, she repeated. Billionaire Vanessa Hale. Forbes magazine Vanessa Hale. That's the one. In our town. Her car broke down. And she came to your garage. It was open. I fixed her belt. Mason focused very intently on his coffee. 40-minute job, Max. Sarah continued staring at him. You're leaving something out. I asked her to dinner. You what? Tommy looked up from his syrup lake. Dad has a date? It's not a date, Mason said automatically, then paused. Okay, it's kind of a date. With the lady from the magazines? Tommy's eyes had gone wide. The pretty one? Sarah was grinning now, the kind of grin that meant Mason was never going to hear the end of this. Tell me everything. So he did. Most of it, anyway. He left out some of the more painful details. Vanessa's confession, his response, the way his heart had felt like it might explode. But he told Sarah enough. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You loved her, Sarah said finally. In high school. I had a crush. Mason, you loved her. He couldn't argue with that. Yeah, I did. And she loved you. Apparently. Sarah shook her head slowly, like she was processing something too big to fully comprehend. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the saddest. I can't decide which. Both, probably. Tommy had abandoned his pancakes and was watching them with the intense focus of a child sensing adult drama. Are you going to marry her? Tommy, because if you marry her, we'd be rich, right? We could get a new house and I could have my own room and maybe a dog. Nobody's getting married, Mason said firmly. It's one dinner. That's it. But even as he said it, he felt something flutter in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or terror. Possibly both. At the garage, Mason tried to focus on work. He finished Mrs. Patterson's Civic by 9, did an oil change on the mayor's truck, and started diagnosing a weird noise in Tom Chen's Subaru. Normal Friday tasks, the kind of thing he could do on autopilot, except he couldn't focus worth a damn. His mind kept drifting to tonight, to Vanessa, to all the things he wanted to say and all the ways he'd probably screw it up. Around noon, Jake Morrison stopped by. Jake had been his best friend since 3rd grade, the same Jake whose jokes Vanessa had mentioned last night. He took one look at Mason and laughed. Dude, you look like you're about to throw up. Thanks. What's going on? Jake hoisted himself onto the workbench, boots dangling. And don't say nothing, because I know that face. Mason sighed. There was no point hiding it. Jake would find out eventually anyway. I have a date tonight. Jake's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? With who? Vanessa Hale. The silence was profound. Then Jake started laughing, the kind of full-body laugh that made him almost fall off the workbench. You're screwing with me. I'm not. Vanessa Hale, the billionaire. Yes. The girl you were obsessed with in high school. I wasn't obsessed. Mason, you wrote her name on your physics notebook. I saw it. Heat crept up Mason's neck. That was one time. It was every day for a month. Jake was grinning like Christmas had come early. Holy shit, man. How did this happen? Mason explained with slightly more detail than he'd given Sarah. When he got to the part about Vanessa's confession, Jake's expression shifted from amused to serious. She really said that? That she'd built everything trying to forget you? Yeah. And you told her you'd noticed her? Yeah. Jake was quiet for a moment. That's heavy, man. I know. So what are you going to do? Mason looked around the garage, at the tools his father had bought 30 years ago, at the oil stains that would never come out, at the life he'd built from ashes and determination. What was he supposed to do? Vanessa lived in a different world, private jets and board meetings, and the kind of money that made problems disappear. He was a mechanic with a kid and a mortgage and hands that never came fully clean. I'm going to have dinner with her, Mason said, and then probably watch her drive back to whatever city she lives in and never see her again. You don't know that. Jake, come on. We're talking about Vanessa Hale, and you're talking about Mason Reed, who once fixed 3 cars in one day when that bus broke down and stranded the entire basketball team. Who took over his dad's failing garage and somehow kept it running through a recession? Who's raised a good kid basically alone for 4 years? Jake slid off the workbench, clapped Mason on the shoulder. You're selling yourself short, man. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. Jake headed for the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Don't waste another 17 years, okay? After Jake left, Mason stood alone in the garage, surrounded by the evidence of his ordinary life. Jake was right. He was scared. Terrified, actually. Because wanting something hurt less when you knew you couldn't have it. That was safe, comfortable even. But now Vanessa had cracked that safety open, and Mason had no idea what to do with the possibilities she'd revealed. Vanessa spent the morning in a conference call with investors in Singapore, discussing third-quarter projections and market expansion plans. She said all the right things, made all the right points, and nobody could tell that her mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere in a small town called Ashford, in a garage that smelled like oil and rain, with a man who'd just upended 17 years of carefully constructed certainty. When the call finally ended, Vanessa closed her laptop and stared at the wall of her hotel suite. She'd checked into the Ashford Inn last night after leaving the garage, too shaken to drive another 2 hours to Portland. The room was nice enough. Clean, quiet, the kind of place that charged reasonable rates and provided continental breakfast. Nothing like the hotels she usually stayed in, everything like the life she'd left behind. Her phone buzzed. Email from her assistant. Meeting with venture capital firm rescheduled to next week. Portland presentation moved to Monday. You have the weekend free unless something urgent comes up. The weekend free. She could drive to Portland today, spend 2 days reviewing reports and preparing presentations. That would be the smart thing, the professional thing. Or she could stay here, have dinner with a mechanic who'd looked at her last night like she was the only person in the world. Vanessa stood up, paced to the window. Downtown Ashford spread out below. 2 blocks of shops, a park, the church with its white steeple. Population 8,000 according to the sign she'd passed last night. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone and newcomers were noticed immediately. She'd grown up in a town like this. Smaller, actually. And she'd spent every second of her teenage years desperate to escape. To get to somewhere bigger and better, where being smart wasn't weird and ambition wasn't suspicious. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, and somehow ended up lonelier than she'd ever been in that small town. Her ex-husband's voice echoed in her memory. You care more about Tech Vance than you do about us. About me. He'd been right, in a way. She'd thrown herself into work after the divorce, using 14-hour days and constant travel as a shield against feeling anything. It was easier to optimize cloud infrastructure than to examine why her marriage had failed. Easier to build an empire than admit she'd married the wrong person for the wrong reasons. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Mason. Jake gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Still on for tonight? Her heart did something complicated. She texted back before she could overthink it. Yes. What time? The response came quickly. 7? I'll pick you up at the inn. See you then. Vanessa set down her phone and looked at herself in the mirror. She was wearing a silk blouse and tailored pants, the kind of outfit that costs more than most people made in a week. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair was perfect. Everything about her screamed success and control and the kind of woman who had her life figured out. She'd never felt less certain about anything. Mason picked Tommy up from school at 3, listened to a detailed recounting of the drama in first-grade recess. Apparently Jessica said that Marcus said that Tommy liked Emily, which was totally not true, Dad. She's gross. And tried not to think about the fact that he had 4 hours until his date. Dinner. It was dinner, not a date. Except it was absolutely a date. Can we get ice cream? Tommy asked as they pulled into the driveway. Did Aunt Sarah say you could have ice cream? She said to ask you. Which was Sarah's way of saying no without being the bad guy. Mason grinned despite his nerves. Nice try, buddy. How about apple slices? That's not ice cream. Correct observation. Tommy sighed dramatically, like the weight of the world rested on his 6-year-old shoulders. Fine. Inside, Sarah was working at the kitchen table, laptop open, headphones in. She looked up when they entered, pulled out one earbud. How was school? Jessica's a liar, Tommy announced cheerfully. Sounds like a typical Friday. Sarah's eyes shifted to Mason. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine. You're having a panic attack. I'm not having a... Mason stopped, took a breath. Okay, maybe a small one. Sarah closed her laptop. Tommy, go wash your hands and I'll get you those apple slices Dad promised. Tommy thundered off toward the bathroom. Sarah stood up, crossed to Mason, put both hands on his shoulders. Listen to me. You're going to go upstairs, take a shower, put on that blue shirt I bought you for Christmas, and show up tonight like the good man you are. Got it? What if? No what ifs. You like her. She likes you. Everything else is just noise. Sarah squeezed his shoulders. And if it doesn't work out, You come home and we eat ice cream and watch stupid movies, but you have to try, Mason. You have to. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Now go shower. You smell like motor oil. Mason went upstairs, stood under hot water until his shoulders unknotted slightly, and tried to remember how dating worked. It had been over a decade since he'd done this, and he'd never done it with someone like Vanessa. The blue shirt Sarah had bought him still had the tags on it. He'd told her it was too nice, that he had nowhere to wear it. She'd insisted he keep it anyway. Apparently she'd known something he hadn't. Mason dressed carefully, checked his reflection, felt ridiculous. He looked like a mechanic playing dress-up. But Sarah was right about the shirt. It fit well, made him look less tired. Downstairs, Tommy was watching cartoons while eating his apple slices with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to consume vegetables. He looked up when Mason entered, eyes going wide. "Wow, Dad, you look fancy." "Thanks, Bud." "Are you nervous?" Mason crouched down next to the couch. "Yeah, a little." "Why?" "How did you explain adult anxiety to a 6-year-old? Sometimes when you really want something to go well, it makes you nervous." Tommy considered this. "Like when I had to read in front of the class." "Exactly like that." "But you said I did great." "You did. So you'll do great too." Tommy said it with the absolute certainty of childhood, like the universe was simple and outcomes were predictable. Mason hugged him. "Love you, kiddo." "Love you too. Don't forget to say please and thank you." Sarah was leaning against the kitchen door frame, suspiciously shiny-eyed. "He's not wrong about the manners. I know how to behave on a date." "Do you? Because the last time you went on one, flip phones were still cool." Mason grabbed his keys. "I'm leaving now." "Have fun. Be yourself. Don't talk about engines." He could still hear Sarah laughing as he got in his truck. Boss. The Ashford Inn was a 3-story building that had been old when Mason was young and somehow managed to look exactly the same 2 decades later. He parked in the lot, killed the engine, sat there trying to remember how to breathe normally. His phone showed 6:58. Mason got out of the truck, walked through the front door into a lobby that smelled like coffee and old carpet. The teenage kid at the desk looked up from his phone, did a double take at seeing Mason in something other than work clothes. "Hey, Mr. Reed." "Hey, Danny, I'm supposed to meet someone." "The lady in 307 said to send you up when you got here." Danny grinned. "She's really pretty." "Yeah, thanks." Mason took the stairs because the elevator was ancient, and he needed the extra 30 seconds to compose himself. "3rd floor, turn right, room 307. He knocked. The door opened. Vanessa stood there in dark jeans and a simple green sweater. Not the expensive suit from last night, not the polished CEO from magazine covers. Just Vanessa, hair down, minimal makeup, looking nervous and real, and so beautiful it hurt. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Mason's brain had apparently forgotten every other word. "You look... that sweater is... It's the Friday sweater." A small smile. "I found it in storage last month. Figured tonight was as good a time as any to bring it back." The Friday sweater, the one he'd mentioned last night. Mason felt something expand in his chest, warm and painful, and entirely too big for his body to contain. "Ready?" he managed. "Ready." They walked down the stairs in silence, through the lobby where Danny wasn't even pretending not to stare, out into the cool October evening. The rain had cleared, leaving everything smelling clean and sharp. "Nice truck," Vanessa said as Mason opened the passenger door for her. "It's 12 years old and makes a concerning noise when I accelerate, but it runs. That's all that matters." She climbed in and Mason walked around to the driver's side, wondering if she was just being polite or if she genuinely didn't care that his truck was held together with determination and prayer, while her Mercedes probably cost more than his house. The restaurant was only 5 minutes away. Angelo's, family-owned since the 70s, red checkered tablecloths and breadsticks that came out hot and endless. Mason had called ahead for a reservation, which felt both necessary and ridiculous since Angelo's was never actually full on Friday nights. But he wanted tonight to be right. They got a corner table, quiet and slightly private. The waitress brought water and menus and gave Mason a look that clearly said the whole town would know about this by morning. Small towns. "So," Vanessa said after they'd ordered, "this is strange." "Yeah." "Good strange or bad strange?" Mason considered that. "Both?" I keep expecting to wake up and find out last night didn't happen. Same. Vanessa turned her water glass in small circles. I've replayed what I said about 1,000 times. The things I told you in the garage. I shouldn't have. I'm glad you did. She looked up, met his eyes. I spent 17 years thinking I'd imagined it, Mason continued. That maybe I'd built up some connection that never existed. And then you said those things, and I realized. He trailed off, not sure how to finish. Realized what? That I wasn't alone. In feeling it. The waitress brought their food. Pasta for Vanessa, chicken parmesan for Mason. They ate in silence for a moment, the comfortable kind that didn't need filling. Can I ask you something? Mason said finally. Anything. Why'd you really come back to Ashford? Your car could have made it to Portland, even with the belt issue. You pulled off specifically here. Vanessa set down her fork, took a breath. I was driving past and I saw the sign for the exit. And I don't know. I hadn't been back since graduation. I told myself I was just curious, that I'd drive through town and then keep going. But I saw your garage, saw the lights on. She met his eyes. And I made a choice. To pull in. To stop running. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. I've spent half my life running, Vanessa said quietly. From this town, from anything that felt small or limiting. I ran to MIT, ran into work, ran into a marriage with someone who seemed safe and appropriate, and I thought I was winning, you know? Every success, every milestone, proof that I'd escaped. But you can't build a life on running away from things. You can only run for so long before you realize you're just empty. She laughed, soft and sad. Sorry, that got heavy. Don't apologize. Mason reached across the table, hesitated, then took her hand. Her fingers were cool, delicate. For what it's worth, I think you built something incredible. Tech Vance, everything you've accomplished, that's not running. That's winning. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, the kid who used to fix his dad's equipment and dream about taking over the garage seems a lot more content than the billionaire CEO who can't remember the last time she slept through the night. Mason squeezed her hand gently. The mechanic has his own problems. Trust me. Like what? Like wondering if he wasted his potential staying in his hometown. Like feeling guilty that his kid doesn't have a mom because he couldn't save her. Like being terrified that he's failing at everything that matters. Vanessa's grip tightened. You're not failing, Mason. Your son is happy and loved. Your sister adores you. You kept your father's legacy alive when it would have been easier to sell and walk away. That's not failure. Neither is building a billion-dollar company. They looked at each other across the checkered tablecloth. Two people who'd spent years feeling inadequate in completely different ways. We're a mess, Vanessa said. Yeah. Think there's hope for us? Mason smiled. Maybe, if we stop comparing ourselves to some impossible standard. Deal. They finished dinner talking about easier things. Tommy's obsession with dinosaurs, Vanessa's terror of public speaking despite doing it constantly, the strange nostalgia of driving through Ashford's unchanged streets. The conversation flowed easier than Mason expected, punctuated by laughter and the kind of comfortable pauses that didn't need filling. When the check came, they both reached for it. I asked you to dinner, Mason said. I'm paying. I have significantly more money. I don't care. Vanessa studied him for a moment, then smiled and pulled her hand back. Okay. Thank you. Outside, the temperature had dropped, October asserting itself. Vanessa shivered slightly, and Mason fought the urge to offer his jacket, like some character in a movie. Walk? Vanessa suggested. I've been in conference calls all day. I could use the fresh air. They ended up at the park, following the path that circled the pond. Streetlights reflected on the water, doubling the light. Somewhere a dog barked. A couple walked past holding hands, nodded a greeting. I used to come here in high school, Vanessa said, when I needed to think. I'd sit on that bench, she pointed, and read until it got dark. I know. She turned to him, surprised. Mason felt heat creep up his neck. I saw you here once, junior year, late October, kind of like tonight. You were reading something huge, probably philosophy based on the size, and you looked so peaceful, content in a way I never felt. I wasn't content, Vanessa said softly. I was lonely. So was I. They'd stopped walking without Mason realizing it, standing close enough that he could see the exact pattern of gold in her green eyes. "We wasted a lot of time," Vanessa said. "Yeah, I don't want to waste more." Mason's heart stopped, restarted, tried to escape his chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm supposed to be in Portland right now, prepping for meetings that don't actually happen until Monday. I'm saying I could drive there tonight and spend the weekend being productive and professional." She stepped closer. "Or I could stay here until Sunday and see where this goes." "Vanessa, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other anymore. I know there's 1,000 reasons this is a terrible idea." Her hand found his. "But I can't get in my car and drive away. Not again. Not without at least trying." Mason looked at her. Really looked. At the vulnerability in her eyes, the hope mixed with fear, the courage it took to say those words out loud. This wasn't the CEO or the billionaire or the magazine cover. This was Vanessa, the girl who'd been lonely too, taking a chance on something that terrified her. He could say no. Should say no, probably. Protect himself. Protect her. Acknowledge all those 1,000 reasons she'd mentioned. Or he could be brave. "Stay," Mason said. Vanessa's breath caught. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He pulled her closer, close enough to feel her shiver. "Stay through Sunday. Let's figure this out. It might not work. Probably won't. We might realize we have nothing in common. Very possible. You might get sick of me by tomorrow afternoon." Mason smiled. Doubtful. Vanessa laughed, and the sound was light and genuine and completely unpracticed. "Okay, I'll stay." "Okay." They stood there by the pond, hands linked, neither quite ready to move. Above them, stars had started appearing through the gaps in the clouds. The same stars that had been there 17 years ago when two teenagers had been too scared to take a chance. But they weren't those teenagers anymore. And this time, neither of them was running. Mason woke up Saturday morning to the sound of his phone vibrating across the nightstand like an angry hornet. He grabbed it without opening his eyes, squinted at the screen. 6:30. A text from Vanessa. "I'm awake and I've already answered 47 emails. Is this what normal people do on Saturdays, or am I broken?" He smiled despite the ungodly hour and typed back, "Normal people sleep until at least 7. You're definitely broken." The response came immediately. Figured. "Want to grab coffee? I promise not to talk about quarterly projections. Give me 30 minutes. Mason rolled out of bed, moved quietly so he wouldn't wake Tommy, and found Sarah already in the kitchen making breakfast. She took one look at him and grinned. "You're smiling. That's either really good or you've completely lost your mind." "Can it be both? How'd it go last night?" Mason poured himself coffee, leaned against the counter. "She's staying through Sunday." Sarah's wooden spoon clattered into the pan. "She's what?" "Staying, here in Ashford, until Sunday." "Holy—" Sarah glanced toward the stairs, lowered her voice. "Mason, that's huge. I know. That's like relationship level stuff. I know. You went from 0 to 60 in approximately 12 hours. I'm aware." Mason took a long drink of coffee. "I'm meeting her for coffee in 20 minutes, and I have no idea what I'm doing." Sarah abandoned the eggs, crossed to him, put both hands on his shoulders. "Listen to me very carefully. You're going to go have coffee with a woman you like. You're going to be yourself, and you're going to stop overthinking every single thing." "What if?" "No. No what ifs. Just go." Mason showered faster than he'd ever showered in his life, threw on jeans and a clean shirt, and was out the door before Tommy woke up demanding pancakes and justice for whatever wrongs had been committed during first-grade recess. The coffee shop was the only one in town, a place called The Grind that served decent espresso and mediocre pastries. Mason found Vanessa at a corner table, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. She saw him, held up one finger in a "give me a second" gesture. "No, tell them we need the revised numbers by Monday morning," she was saying. "I don't care if Chen thinks it's unreasonable. The board wants accuracy, not speed." A pause. "Yes. Thank you, David. I'll review everything Sunday night." She hung up, closed the laptop, and looked at Mason with an expression that was half exhaustion, half apology. "Sorry, crisis in the Singapore office. It's 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday. Singapore doesn't care about American weekends." She gestured to the empty chair. "I ordered you black coffee. That's what you drank in high school. Please tell me that hasn't changed or I'll feel like an idiot. Mason sat down. Still black. Good memory. I remember everything about you. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. It's actually kind of annoying. What else do you remember? Vanessa leaned back in her chair, coffee cup cradled in both hands. You had a tell when you were lying. You touched your left ear. Your handwriting was terrible, but you were weirdly good at drawing in the margins of your notebooks. You listened to terrible music, lots of early 2000s rock that hasn't aged well. Hey, that music was great. It really wasn't, she smiled. You sat in the third row in English, right side. You always borrowed pens and never returned them. And you laughed at Mrs. Henderson's jokes even when nobody else did because you felt bad for her. Mason stared at her. I thought you didn't notice me. I told you. I noticed everything. Vanessa took a sip of coffee. What about you? What do you remember about me? Everything, Mason thought. Every single thing. You cleared your throat before answering questions in class, he said, like you were giving yourself permission to speak. You ate lunch fast so you could spend more time reading. You wore the same watch every day. Silver, too big for your wrist. Probably your dad's. My grandfather's, Vanessa said quietly. You triple-checked your locker combination like you didn't trust yourself to remember it, and you hummed when you thought nobody was listening. Classical stuff, usually. Mozart. My mom played it constantly when I was growing up. They sat there looking at each other across the small table. Years of unspoken observation laid out between them, like evidence of something neither had been brave enough to name. We were idiots, Vanessa said finally. Complete idiots. Think we've gotten any smarter? Mason laughed. Doubtful. The coffee shop door opened and Mayor Patricia Chen walked in, saw them, and did a visible double-take. She recovered quickly, smiled too brightly, and made a beeline for their table. Mason, and you must be Vanessa Hale. I read about you in Fortune magazine last month. Vanessa stood, shook the mayor's hand with the practiced ease of someone who did this constantly. Nice to meet you. I heard you were in town. Car trouble, right? Patricia's eyes flicked between them with the intensity of someone mentally composing the gossip she'd spread later. How wonderful that Mason could help. He was very helpful, Vanessa said smoothly. And now you're having coffee together. How nice. Patricia's smile could have powered the entire town. Well, I won't interrupt. Just wanted to say hello. She left, but not before glancing back twice. Mason groaned. That'll be all over town by noon. Does that bother you? He considered it. A week ago, yes. He'd spent years keeping his head down, avoiding attention, staying safely in the background of Ashford life. But now? No, Mason said, surprising himself. Let them talk. Vanessa's expression softened into something that looked almost like relief. Good, because I don't do subtle very well. They finished their coffee and walked out into a Saturday morning that was trying hard to be cheerful. Sunlight, cool air, the smell of someone burning leaves somewhere. Normal October things that felt anything but normal. So what do people do in Ashford on Saturdays? Vanessa asked. Depends. Families go to the farmer's market. Teenagers hang out at the park. Old people complain about both. What do you do? Usually, catch up on garage work, spend time with Tommy, try to convince myself I'll actually relax. Mason glanced at her. What do billionaires do on Saturdays? Conference calls, usually, review reports, prepare for Monday. She made a face. I'm very boring. You're very driven. That's different. Is it? Because from here it looks like I forgot how to have a life outside work. They'd reached Mason's truck. He unlocked it, hesitated before opening her door. You want to meet Tommy? Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. Really? He already knows I had dinner with you. Asked if I was going to marry you so we could be rich and get a dog. Smart kid. Terrifying kid. Mason opened the door. No pressure, but he's pretty great and Sarah's making her famous pancakes, which are objectively better than anything at the grind. Vanessa climbed in. I'd like that. Meeting Tommy. Fair warning, though. I'm terrible with children. You run a company with 3,000 employees. Those are adults. Adults make sense. Children are chaos in human form. Mason laughed and started the truck. You'll be fine. The drive home took 5 minutes. The whole way, Mason tried not to think about what he was doing, bringing Vanessa into his actual life. his home, introducing her to his kid. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real. Sarah opened the door before they'd even reached the porch, Tommy bouncing excitedly behind her. "Dad, Aunt Sarah said you brought a guest. Is it the magazine lady?" "Tommy, what did we say about personal space?" Sarah's eyes met Mason's over Tommy's head, eyebrows raised in a clear, "We're talking about this later" expression. "Right, sorry." Tommy stepped back approximately 6 inches. "Hi, I'm Tommy. I'm 6 3/4 and I can read chapter books." Vanessa crouched down to his level, and Mason watched something shift in her expression. The CEO mask dropped away, replaced by genuine uncertainty. "Hi, Tommy. I'm Vanessa. I'm 30, and I still can't do a cartwheel." Tommy giggled. "That's okay. Cartwheels are hard. Do you like pancakes?" "I love pancakes." "Good, because Aunt Sarah makes the best ones in the universe, probably." Tommy grabbed Vanessa's hand with the casual physical confidence of 6-year-olds everywhere. "Come on, I'll show you my dinosaur collection while she finishes cooking." Vanessa let herself be dragged inside, shooting Mason a slightly panicked look over her shoulder. He just shrugged, grinning. Sarah cornered him in the kitchen while Tommy was explaining the difference between velociraptors and Deinonychus to Vanessa in the living room. "You brought her home," Sarah hissed. "She wanted to meet Tommy." "Mason, you don't bring women home unless it's serious." "I know." "So this is serious?" He looked through the doorway at Vanessa, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor examining plastic dinosaurs with the kind of intense focus she probably brought to board meetings. Tommy was talking a mile a minute, completely unintimidated by her success or money or anything else. "I don't know what it is yet," Mason said honestly. "But yeah, it feels serious." Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "Then don't screw it up." "Helpful, thanks." Breakfast was chaos in the best way. Tommy talked endlessly, barely pausing to breathe between bites of pancake. He told Vanessa about first grade, about how Jessica was a liar, about the field trip to the science museum where he saw real fossils. And Vanessa listened. Really listened, asking questions that weren't condescending, laughing at his jokes, treating him like a person instead of a small, annoying human. "My mom died when I was 2, Tommy said suddenly, in the way kids dropped emotional bombs into casual conversation. "I don't remember her much." The table went quiet. Mason's chest tightened the way it always did when Tommy brought up Jen. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said gently. "That must be really hard." "It's okay. Dad says she would have liked me." Tommy pushed syrup around his plate. "Do you have kids?" "No, I was married for a while, but it didn't work out." "Why not?" "Tommy," Mason started. "It's okay." Vanessa met Tommy's eyes. "We wanted different things. He wanted me to be someone I wasn't, and I didn't know how to be myself and be with him at the same time." Tommy processed this with the seriousness of someone far older than 6. "That's sad." "Yeah, it was. But you're happy now, right? Because you're here having pancakes with us." Vanessa's smile was genuine. "You know what? I really am." After breakfast, Tommy convinced Vanessa to play dinosaurs, which apparently involved elaborate scenarios where the velociraptors had to rescue the Triceratops from the evil Tyrannosaurus. Mason watched from the couch, coffee in hand, while Sarah did dishes and pretended not to eavesdrop. "Your velociraptor needs to jump over the couch," Tommy instructed. "That's a very high couch." "Velociraptors can jump super high. It's science." "Well, if it's science." Vanessa made her plastic dinosaur leap dramatically over the couch arm. "Like that? Perfect. Now you have to make the sound." "What sound?" "The velociraptor sound." Vanessa looked helplessly at Mason. He just grinned and sipped his coffee. "I don't know what sound velociraptors make," Vanessa admitted. Tommy demonstrated with a series of screeches that probably violated noise ordinances. Vanessa gamely attempted to replicate it, producing something that sounded more confused than prehistoric. "That was terrible," Tommy said cheerfully. "I warned you I was bad with kids." "You're not bad. You're just not good at dinosaur sounds. That's okay." "Dad's terrible too." "Thanks, buddy," Mason called from the couch. They played for another 20 minutes before Tommy got distracted by cartoons. Vanessa collapsed onto the couch next to Mason, slightly breathless. That was exhausting. Welcome to parenting. How do you do that every day? Lots of coffee, questionable decisions, occasional panic attacks. Vanessa laughed, then went quiet. He's great, Mason. Really, you should be proud. I am. He glanced at Tommy, who was completely absorbed in whatever cartoon physics were happening on screen. I'm terrified I'm screwing it up, but I'm proud. You're not screwing it up. Anyone can see that. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Tommy, why don't you and I go to the farmer's market? I need apples for pie. Tommy perked up. Can I get a candy apple? We'll negotiate. That means yes. Tommy scrambled off the floor, already hunting for his shoes. Sarah looked at Mason with an expression that clearly said, "You're welcome," before herding Tommy toward the door. We'll be back in an hour, maybe 2. Depends on how long Tommy spends looking at the puppies. Then they were gone, and the house was suddenly very quiet. Vanessa shifted slightly on the couch, not quite looking at him. That was subtle. Sarah's about as subtle as a brick. I like her. She likes you. I can tell because she left us alone, which means she approves. If she didn't, she'd have stayed to supervise. Vanessa smiled. Good to know I passed inspection. They sat there in comfortable silence for a moment, shoulders almost touching. The morning sun came through the window in dusty beams, highlighting every worn spot on the furniture, every scuff mark on the walls. Mason's house wasn't fancy, wasn't anything close to what Vanessa was probably used to, but she didn't seem to care. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said. Shoot. Why'd you stay? In Ashford, I mean. You could have left after high school. Lots of people do. Mason considered the question. Nobody asked it directly, but he knew people wondered. The star football player who'd gotten scholarship offers, who could have gone anywhere, who'd chosen to stay. My dad needed help with the garage, he said. Mom had died 2 years earlier and he was struggling. So I went to community college, learned the business, figured I'd leave eventually. He shrugged. Then I met Jen. Got married. Had Tommy. By the time I realized I'd never left, I didn't want to anymore. Do you regret it? Some days. When the furnace breaks and I can't afford to fix it, or when I'm doing Tommy's math homework and realize I barely remember algebra. But mostly, he looked around the small living room at the photos on the walls, at Tommy's toys scattered across the floor. No, this is home. That matters more than I thought it would. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. I spent so long trying to get away from places like this. Small towns, everybody knowing your business, the feeling that life was happening somewhere else. She twisted her hands together. And now I live in a city where I don't know my neighbors, and nobody cares what I do, and I'm more isolated than I ever was growing up. You could change that. Could I? I built an entire life around being somewhere else, being someone else. I don't know how to just stop. Mason turned toward her. You stopped last night. You pulled into my garage when you could have kept driving. You stayed for dinner when you could have left. You're sitting on my couch on a Saturday morning instead of being in some hotel reviewing reports. He reached over, took her hand. You already know how to stop, Vanessa. You're just scared of what happens next. Her fingers tightened around his. What if what happens next doesn't work? Then it doesn't work. And we'll both survive, same as we've survived everything else. Mason pulled her slightly closer. But what if it does? Vanessa looked at him with those green eyes that had haunted him for 17 years, and Mason saw the exact moment she made a decision. She kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or movie perfect. Their noses bumped slightly, and Mason forgot what to do with his hands for a second. But then Vanessa's fingers tangled in his hair, and his arm wrapped around her waist, and everything clicked into place. She tasted like coffee and maple syrup and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Vanessa laughed shakily. That was, yeah. I haven't kissed anyone in over a year. I haven't kissed anyone since Jen. Mason rested his forehead against hers. Pretty sure I forgot how. You remembered fine. They sat there tangled together on the couch, and Mason felt something in his chest that had been closed for years slowly crack open. This was dangerous, terrifying. Vanessa would leave eventually, back to her real life, her company, her world that had no room for small-town mechanics. But right now, she was here, and that was enough. The sound of Sarah's car in the driveway made them spring apart like guilty teenagers. By the time the front door opened, they were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, trying to look casual and probably failing miserably. Tommy burst in carrying a candy apple bigger than his head. "Dad, look what Aunt Sarah got me, and there were puppies and one licked my face, and can we get a dog?" We've discussed the dog situation. But this is a new situation, with new puppies. Sarah appeared behind him, took one look at Mason and Vanessa's faces, and smirked. "Have a nice hour?" "Very productive," Mason said. "I bet." The rest of Saturday passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal. Vanessa stayed for lunch, grilled cheese that Tommy insisted she had to try because Aunt Sarah made them the best way. She laughed at Tommy's jokes, helped him build an elaborate block tower that immediately collapsed, and looked more relaxed than Mason had seen her since she'd pulled into his garage Thursday night. Around 3, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, grimaced. "I need to take this work thing." She stepped outside onto the porch, and Mason watched through the window as her whole posture changed. Shoulders back, expression sharp, every inch the CEO. She paced while talking, gesturing with her free hand, and Mason could see her slipping back into that other version of herself. The version that didn't belong here. When she came back inside 20 minutes later, she looked exhausted. "Everything okay?" Mason asked. "Problem with a client contract. I need to review some documents tonight. Make calls tomorrow." She ran a hand through her hair. "I'm sorry. This is exactly what I said I wouldn't do." "It's your job. I get it." "Do you? Because I'm sitting here thinking about quarterly projections while you're just trying to have a normal Saturday." "Vanessa." Mason stood up, crossed to her. "You run a billion-dollar company. I'd be more worried if you didn't have to take work calls." "That's what my ex-husband said, at first." Her laugh was bitter. "Then it became all I did. Work calls, work trips, work everything. Until he told me I cared more about Tech Vance than our marriage." "Did you?" She met his eyes. "Yeah, I did. Because the marriage was failing and work was easier than dealing with that." "Is that what you're doing now? Using work to avoid dealing with this?" "I don't know." Vanessa looked around the living room, at Tommy's toys, at the lived-in warmth of it all. "This terrifies me, Mason. You, Tommy, all of it. Because I don't know how to be the person who has family pancakes and plays dinosaurs and doesn't check email every 5 minutes. So learn." "What if I can't?" "Then you can't. But at least you tried." Tommy wandered over, dinosaur in hand, and tugged on Vanessa's sleeve. "Are you leaving?" "Not yet, buddy. I just need to do some work later." "Oh, okay." He considered this. "My dad works a lot too, but he always comes back." Something in Vanessa's expression cracked. She crouched down to Tommy's level. "Yeah?" "Yeah, he says work is important, but family is more important, even when he's tired." Vanessa looked up at Mason over Tommy's head, and he saw everything she was feeling written across her face. The fear, the hope, the desperate want to believe this could actually work. "Your dad's a smart guy," she said to Tommy. "I know, he fixed your car real fast." After dinner, pizza that Mason ordered because nobody felt like cooking, Vanessa reluctantly headed back to the inn to handle her work crisis. Mason walked her out to her Mercedes, which was still parked in his driveway like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong decade. "Thank you for today," Vanessa said, "for letting me meet Tommy, for the dinosaurs and the terrible velociraptor sounds. Thank you for making the sounds. That was above and beyond." She laughed, then sobered. "Mason, I meant what I said earlier about being terrified. I know, but I'm going to try, to be here, to figure this out." She stepped closer. "I can't promise I'll be good at it. I don't need good, I just need you to try." Vanessa kissed him again, softer this time, like a promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow. We can grab lunch, walk around town. Tommy has a soccer game at 2 if you want to watch 6-year-olds run in the wrong direction for an hour." "I would love nothing more." Mason watched her drive away, taillights disappearing down the street, and tried not to think about the fact that every goodbye felt like it might be the last one. Inside, Sarah was putting Tommy to bed. Mason found her afterward in the kitchen, drinking tea and looking at him with an expression that was equal parts knowing and concerned. "You're falling for her," Sarah said. "I fell for her 17 years ago. I'm just admitting it now." "That's not what I mean. Back then it was safe. A crush on someone you'd never actually be with. But now? Sarah set down her mug. Now it's real. And real means you can actually get hurt. I know. Does she know? How you feel? Mason thought about Vanessa's confession in the garage, about her fear, about the way she'd looked at Tommy like she was trying to imagine a life she'd never let herself want. Yeah, he said. She knows. She's just as scared as I am. Then you're either both very brave or both very stupid. Probably both. Sarah hugged him, quick and fierce. Just don't lose yourself, okay? You did that with Jen toward the end, trying to save her, and it almost broke you. This is different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're already rearranging your life around someone who might not stay. Mason didn't have an answer for that. Because Sarah was right. He was rearranging, reorganizing, making space for Vanessa in a life that had been carefully constructed to survive without hope. And maybe that was stupid, but maybe it was the only way forward. Sunday morning arrived with rain because apparently the universe had decided that was their theme. Mason spent the morning at the garage catching up on work while Tommy stayed home with Sarah. Around 11, Vanessa texted, "Rain check on lunch?" Pun intended. Conference call ran long and now I'm drowning in contract revisions. No problem. Need anything? Coffee. Sanity. A clone so I can be two places at once. Fresh out of clones. Can deliver coffee. 20 minutes later, Mason showed up at the inn with 2 large coffees and a bag of those mediocre pastries from the grind. He knocked on room 307, heard Vanessa's muffled "come in," and entered to find her surrounded by papers, laptop open, phone on speaker. Yes, I understand the timeline is aggressive, but that's why we're paying premium rates, she was saying. I need the revised proposal by Tuesday EOD or we're moving to the backup vendor. She pointed at the coffee, mouthed "thank you," and continued her call. Mason set everything on the desk and started to leave, but Vanessa grabbed his wrist, held him there. So he stayed, perched on the edge of the bed, watching her work. This was the Vanessa from magazine covers, sharp, focused, completely in control. She spoke with the kind of authority that made grown executives scramble to meet her demands. Numbers flew around the conversation, figures with so many zeros Mason lost count. This was her world, and he had absolutely no place in it. The call finally ended. Vanessa closed her laptop, pressed both hands against her eyes. Sorry, that was brutal. Sounded intense. Vendors trying to renegotiate terms at the last second. Classic power play. She reached for her coffee. Thank you for this. You didn't have to. I know. Vanessa took a long drink, then looked at him over the rim of her cup. You're wondering if I'm always like this. Like what? Work-obsessed. Unable to turn it off. The person my ex-husband couldn't stand to be around anymore. Mason chose his words carefully. I'm wondering how you balance it. The work you love with the life you want. That's the thing. I don't balance it. I never learned how. She set down the coffee. My whole life has been about proving I could succeed. Scholarships, MIT, building tech vans from nothing, and somewhere along the way I forgot there was supposed to be something else besides work. Is that what you want? Something else? I don't know, maybe. When I'm with you and Tommy, when I'm playing dinosaurs and eating pancakes, it feels... She trailed off. Feels what? Possible. Like maybe I could have that, a real life. Not just conference calls and quarterly reports. Vanessa stood up, moved to the window. Rain streaked the glass, turning downtown Ashford into a watercolor blur. But then my phone rings and I'm back in it. And I'm good at this, Mason. Really good. I don't know if I can just walk away. Nobody's asking you to walk away. Aren't you? Because I don't see how this works. I live in San Francisco. My company's there. My life is there. And you're here with Tommy and the garage and roots that go down generations. She turned to face him. What are we doing? Really? The question hung in the air between them, unavoidable. Mason stood up, crossed to her. I don't know, but I know I haven't felt this alive in years. And I know that when you're here, everything makes more sense. He took her hands. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe we just see where it goes. That's terrifying. Yeah. I could get on a plane tomorrow, and this whole weekend becomes just a story we tell ourselves. The time we almost had something. Or you could get on a plane and come back next weekend, and the weekend after that, and we figure it out one day at a time. Vanessa searched his face. You'd really do that? Long distance, complicated schedules, all of it? For you? Yeah, I would. She kissed him then, and Mason tasted salt, tears, though he wasn't sure if they were hers or his or both. When they broke apart, Vanessa was smiling through the crying. Okay, she whispered, let's try. Let's be stupid and brave and see what happens. Okay. They stood there holding each other while rain hammered the windows and the real world waited just outside. It wasn't a perfect moment. Vanessa's phone kept buzzing with emails, and Mason's back hurt from too many hours bent over engines, and neither of them had any idea how to make this actually work. But it was theirs, and for now, that was enough. Tommy's soccer game turned into a comedy of errors that had nothing to do with sports, and everything to do with 6-year-olds interpreting the rules as loose suggestions. Mason stood on the sideline next to Vanessa, who'd shown up in jeans and a Tech Vance hoodie that probably cost more than his monthly electric bill, watching his son chase the ball in entirely the wrong direction. I think he's supposed to go that way, Vanessa said, pointing toward the correct goal. He's creating his own strategy. His strategy appears to be running in circles. He's very committed to it. Tommy finally kicked the ball, which ricocheted off another kid's shin and rolled slowly toward their own goal. The other parents erupted in polite applause anyway, because that's what you did at 6-year-old soccer games where everyone got a participation trophy, and nobody kept score except the one dad, who definitely kept score. This is chaos, Vanessa observed. This is childhood. I never did this. Team sports, I mean. I was always in the library or the computer lab. Mason glanced at her. You missed out. Nothing builds character like getting hit in the face with a dodgeball. I got hit with plenty of dodgeballs. I just did it alone, not as part of a team. There was a story there, sad and familiar. Mason reached over and took her hand without thinking about it, and was relieved when she didn't pull away. Across the field, he caught Sarah watching them with an expression that was half approval, half concern. She'd been watching a lot over the past week, ever since Vanessa had left Sunday evening with promises to call, to come back, to try, and she had called. Every night, actually. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 5 minutes between meetings. Conversations about nothing and everything. Tommy's obsession with pterodactyls, Vanessa's nightmare client in Boston, the weird noise Mason's truck was making, the board meeting that had gone sideways. It felt normal and impossible at the same time. The game ended with nobody quite sure what the score was and all the kids demanding juice boxes. Tommy ran over, grass-stained and happy. Did you see me almost score? I saw you run really fast, Mason said diplomatically. I was the fastest, probably. Tommy noticed Vanessa and lit up. You came. Did you see me almost score? You were very impressive. I know, next week I'm going to score for real. He grabbed his juice box from Sarah. Are you staying for dinner? Aunt Sarah's making tacos. Vanessa looked at Mason, a question in her eyes. You're welcome to stay, he said. Fair warning, Tommy's version of setting the table involves a lot of creative placement. The forks don't have assigned seats, Dad. The forks need to be on the left, buddy. That's just your opinion. Vanessa laughed, and Mason felt something warm settle in his chest. This was working somehow. Against all logic, against every practical obstacle, they were finding a rhythm. At dinner, Tommy monopolized Vanessa's attention with a detailed explanation of why pterodactyls weren't actually dinosaurs but were still cool. Sarah made tacos that were objectively perfect, and Mason sat there watching his small, chaotic family expand to include someone who shouldn't fit but somehow did. After Tommy went to bed, after Sarah retreated to her room with a knowing smile, Mason and Vanessa ended up on the porch. The November air had bite to it now, winter announcing itself in the temperature drop. I have to go back tomorrow, Vanessa said quietly. Mason had known this was coming. She'd already pushed her trip twice, rescheduled meetings, delegated things that normally required her direct attention, but knowing didn't make it easier. I know. Board meeting Wednesday, client presentation Thursday. I can't move either one. I'm not asking you to. Vanessa turned to face him, pulling her coat tighter. This is the part where it gets hard, isn't it? The logistics, the distance. Probably. San Francisco to Ashford is a 3-hour flight. plus airport time, security, all of it. That's a full day of travel each way. Mason did the math in his head. If she came every other weekend, that was 2 days of travel for 2 days here. Unsustainable long term. What if I came there sometimes, he offered. Sarah could watch Tommy. I could fly out for a weekend. And leave the garage? Jake can cover. He's been asking for more hours anyway. Vanessa studied his face. You'd really do that? Get on a plane, come to a city you don't know? For you? Yeah. I hate that this is so complicated. Me too. They stood there in the cold, and Mason felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. The practical impossibilities. The careers that couldn't be uprooted. The kid who needed stability. The life Vanessa had built that didn't have room for a small-town mechanic. I'm going to figure this out, Vanessa said suddenly. I don't know how yet, but I will, because I'm not losing this, not again. What do you mean? I spent 17 years building a life around the hole you left, and now that you're actually here, actually real and not just a memory, I'm not walking away. She grabbed his jacket, pulled him closer. I'm not that scared girl anymore, Mason. I fight for what I want now, and I want this. Mason kissed her, tasting determination and coffee, and the slight edge of fear that came with making promises neither of them knew how to keep. When they broke apart, Vanessa was shivering. You should go inside, Mason said. It's freezing. In a minute. I'm not ready for today to end yet. Tomorrow's not goodbye forever. I know. It just feels like it. Mason pulled her against him, and they stood there while the temperature dropped and the stars came out. And somewhere down the street, a dog barked at nothing. Normal November night in Ashford, except nothing about this was normal. Eventually, Vanessa did go inside, back to the inn to pack and prepare for an early flight. Mason watched her taillights disappear and tried not to think about all the ways this could fall apart. The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern that was equal parts wonderful and exhausting. Vanessa flew back the following weekend, then the one after that. She started keeping clothes at Mason's house, a toothbrush in the bathroom, her laptop charger permanently plugged in next to the couch. Tommy accepted her presence with the easy adaptability of children, incorporating Vanessa's here into his weekly routine the same way he'd incorporated soccer practice and library time. But the cracks were starting to show. Vanessa missed Tommy's school play because a client meeting in New York ran late. She'd apologized over video call while Tommy held up his construction paper costume, trying not to look disappointed. Mason had to cancel a weekend trip to San Francisco because Mrs. Patterson's transmission finally died and she needed her car by Monday for work. Vanessa had said she understood, but he'd heard the frustration underneath. And then there was Thanksgiving. I want Vanessa to come for Thanksgiving, Tommy announced at breakfast 3 weeks before the holiday. Sarah paused mid-pour with the orange juice. That's a big ask, buddy. Why? She comes lots of weekends. Thanksgiving is different. That's family time. She's basically family now, right, Dad? Mason looked at his son, at the simple logic of 6-year-old reasoning that didn't account for complicated adult situations. I'll ask her, okay? But she might have her own plans. Like what? Like a family of her own, Mason thought. Except he'd never asked about that. Never asked about Vanessa's parents, her childhood, whether she had siblings or traditions or people waiting for her. He called her that night after Tommy was asleep. Hey, Vanessa answered, sounding tired. Give me 1 second. I'm just finishing an email. Mason heard typing, pictured her in her San Francisco apartment that he'd never seen, living a life he couldn't quite imagine. Okay, sorry. How was your day? Good. Tommy's school play was cute. He was a tree and took it very seriously. I'm sorry I missed it. I know, it's okay. Mason paused. He asked if you wanted to come for Thanksgiving. Silence on the other end. Vanessa? I'm here. Just thinking. More silence. I usually spend Thanksgiving alone, actually. My parents died when I was in college. Car accident. And I was an only child, so... I'm sorry. I didn't know. I don't talk about it much. Her voice was careful, controlled. After they died, holidays became just another day. Easier that way. Mason's chest tightened. You could come here if you want. Sarah cooks too much food and Tommy would be thrilled. You don't have to invite me out of pity. I'm not. I'm inviting you because I want you here, because Tommy wants you here, because Thanksgiving alone in an apartment sounds terrible, and you shouldn't have to do that. Mason, Just think about it, okay? She did come for Thanksgiving, arriving Wednesday night with a pie from some expensive bakery in San Francisco that made Sarah's homemade pumpkin look humble by comparison. Tommy dragged her into the kitchen to help with prep work, which mostly involved Vanessa trying to peel potatoes while he narrated a complicated story about turkeys achieving sentience. "I don't think I'm doing this right," Vanessa said, holding up a potato that looked more murdered than peeled. Sarah glanced over. "You're doing fine. Just take off the skin, not half the potato." This is harder than negotiating with venture capitalists. At least the potato doesn't ask for equity. Thanksgiving Day itself was chaos in the best way. Sarah's kitchen became a war zone of pots and timers, and the constant threat of something burning. Tommy set the table with his creative fork placement. Mason carved the turkey with the confidence of someone who'd watched YouTube tutorials and hoped for the best. And Vanessa fit into it all like she'd been there forever. "This is really good," she said at dinner, gesturing with her fork at the spread. "All of it." "Better than eating alone?" Sarah asked. "So much better I can't even describe it." Tommy kicked his feet under the table, happy and full and completely oblivious to the adult emotions swirling around him. "Can we do this every year?" The question hung in the air. Sarah recovered first. "Let's get through this year first, buddy." But later, after Tommy was asleep and Sarah had gone to bed, Mason found Vanessa standing in the kitchen looking at the leftovers with an expression he couldn't read. "You okay?" he asked. "I was just thinking. Every year I tell myself Thanksgiving doesn't matter, that it's just a day, just a holiday that other people care about, and I make myself busy with work or travel or anything that lets me pretend I'm not lonely." She turned to face him. But today wasn't lonely. Today felt like what I've been missing my whole life. Mason crossed to her, pulled her close. "You don't have to miss it anymore." "Don't I? I go back to San Francisco on Sunday and this all becomes a memory again." "It doesn't have to be that way." "Then what's the alternative? I can't run Tech Vance from Ashford. You can't move to San Francisco and leave Tommy's school, Sarah, the garage. We're stuck, Mason." He didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. They were stuck between two lives that didn't overlap, held together by stolen weekends and phone calls and the hope that somehow it would work out. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," Mason said slowly. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to fit your life here and I'm trying to fit mine there. But what if neither of us has to fit completely? What if we build something new?" Vanessa pulled back slightly to look at him. "That sounds nice in theory. What does it look like in practice?" "I don't know yet. But I know I'm not giving up on this. On us. Even though it's impossible? Especially because it's impossible." She kissed him then, and Mason tasted hope mixed with fear, possibility mixed with doubt. The week after Thanksgiving, everything changed. Mason was under a Honda Accord when his phone rang. He ignored it. Hands were covered in grease and he was halfway through replacing a timing belt. But then it rang again. And again. He rolled out, wiped his hands, grabbed the phone. Vanessa's name on the screen. "Hey, I'm in the middle of yeesh. I need to tell you something and I need you to just listen, okay?" Something in her voice made Mason's stomach drop. "Okay." "I had a board meeting this morning. We've been discussing expansion plans, new markets, growth strategy, standard stuff." She took a breath. "They want to open a Pacific Northwest office, Seattle specifically, major client base up there, tech talent, all the reasons that make sense." "That's good, right?" "They want me to oversee the setup personally, move there for at least a year, maybe permanently depending on how it goes." Mason's brain stuttered. "Move. To Seattle. It's 3 hours from Ashford by car. I could come down weekends, or you could come up. We'd actually see each other more than once every 2 weeks." She was talking fast now, words tumbling over each other. "I know it's still not perfect. I know you have the garage and Tommy and your whole life there. But it's closer, Mason. It's something." He sat down on the concrete floor of his garage, phone pressed to his ear, trying to process. When would this happen? "They want me there by January. I'd need to find a place, set up the office, hire local staff. It's going to be crazy for a while." "But you'd be 3 hours away." 3 hours. Mason closed his eyes. This was what hope felt like when it actually had substance behind it. "That's manageable." "Yeah?" "Yeah, I mean, it's still complicated. You'll be building an office from scratch. I've got Tommy in the garage. But 3 hours is a hell of a lot better than 3,000 miles. Vanessa laughed, shaky and relieved. I was terrified you'd tell me it wasn't enough, that you needed more than occasional weekends. I need you however I can get you, even if it means me showing up exhausted from 16-hour workdays. Even then. They talked for another 20 minutes, working through logistics that were still mostly theoretical. Vanessa would fly up to Seattle next week to start looking at office space and apartments. The official transition wouldn't happen until after the holidays. She'd still be based in San Francisco until then, still traveling constantly, still juggling impossible schedules. But there was a plan now, an actual concrete plan. When Mason finally hung up and went back to the Honda, Jake was standing there with his arms crossed and a knowing grin. You heard all that? Mason asked. Dude, you were literally yelling into your phone. Pretty sure Mrs. Patterson heard from across town. She's moving to Seattle. I gathered that. So what, you're going to do long distance but shorter? Something like that. Jake shook his head, still grinning. Man, when you decide to make your life complicated, you really commit. Tell me about it. But despite the complications, despite all the logistics still to figure out, Mason felt lighter than he had in weeks. 3 hours was doable. 3 hours meant day trips, meant spontaneous visits, meant Tommy could come along sometimes. 3 hours meant this might actually work. He told Tommy that night at dinner. Seattle's where the Space Needle is. Tommy bounced in his chair. Can we visit? Can we go up in it? Maybe, when Vanessa gets settled. Is she going to live there forever? Mason exchanged a look with Sarah. I don't know, buddy. At least a year. But she'll still visit us, right? Yeah, more than she does now, actually. Tommy processed this with the seriousness of someone weighing major life decisions. Okay, that's good. I like Vanessa. She's bad at dinosaur sounds, but she tries really hard. Sarah waited until after Tommy was in bed to corner Mason in the kitchen. Seattle, she said. Seattle. That's a big change. It's a good change. Is it? Or are you just so desperate for this to work that you're convincing yourself it is? Mason leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. What do you want me to say, Sarah? That I'm terrified this is still not enough? That even 3 hours might be too much with her schedule and my responsibilities? That I'm already thinking about all the ways it could fall apart? I want you to be realistic. I am being realistic. Realistically, I'm in love with someone whose life doesn't fit with mine. Realistically, this is probably going to be hard and messy and might not work out. He met his sister's eyes. But realistically, I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Sarah's expression softened. You really love her. Yeah, I really do. Then I hope Seattle works. I hope you two figure it out. She hugged him quickly. Just don't lose yourself in the process, okay? You have a habit of doing that. The next few weeks were a blur of planning and logistics. Vanessa flew to Seattle 3 times scouting locations, sent Mason pictures of potential office spaces and apartments that all looked expensive and modern and nothing like Ashford. They video called constantly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes with Tommy demanding to show Vanessa his latest dinosaur acquisition, sometimes late at night when they were both too tired for words but needed to see each other's faces anyway. The first week of December, Vanessa came to Ashford for what she called a reality check weekend. I need to make sure this is actually viable, she said over Friday night pizza. 3 hours sounds manageable in theory, but in practice, with traffic and weather and work schedules, you're overthinking it. I'm thinking exactly the right amount. This is a massive life change, Mason. I'm moving to a new city, setting up a major office, and trying to maintain a relationship. Those are 3 full-time jobs. Tommy looked up from his pizza. What's viable mean? It means possible, Vanessa said. Oh, everything's possible if you try hard enough. That's what my teacher says. Your teacher clearly hasn't dealt with Seattle traffic. Saturday morning, Vanessa insisted on doing a practice run. She set her phone timer and drove to Seattle, hitting traffic and construction and every possible delay. Mason stayed home fielding text updates. 11:47 a.m., hour 1. This is fine. 12:52 p.m. Traffic is a nightmare. Why does everyone need to go to Seattle right now? 2:15 p.m. Finally here. 3 hours and 40 minutes. Not 3 hours. 2:16 p.m. Okay, I'm being dramatic. It wasn't that bad. 2:17 p.m. It was terrible. I hate driving. She came back Sunday afternoon looking frustrated and determined in equal measure. 3 hours and 40 minutes, she announced, dropping her bag by the door. Each way. That's 7 hours and 20 minutes of driving for one weekend visit. So we adjust. You come every other weekend. I come to you sometimes. We figure it out. It's not sustainable long term. Then we change it when we need to, but for now, it's what we've got. Vanessa sat down heavily on the couch. I'm scared this isn't enough. That I'm uprooting my entire life for something that's still just weekends and phone calls. Mason sat beside her, took her hand. What would be enough? What do you actually want? She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I want to wake up next to you. I want to have breakfast with Tommy and hear about his dinosaur facts. I want to be there for the school plays and the soccer games and the random Tuesday nights that don't matter, except they're ours. She looked at him. But I also want my company. I want to build things and make decisions and succeed at what I'm good at. And I don't know how to have both. Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe there's a middle ground. Like what? Like you base yourself in Seattle, build the office, do the work you love. And on weekends, you're here. Not visiting, not squeezing in time between meetings. Actually, here, part of this. He gestured around the small living room. It's not perfect, but it's real. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and probably a disaster waiting to happen. But I'd rather have a complicated disaster with you than a simple life without you. Vanessa kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to pour 17 years of want into one moment. When they broke apart, she was crying. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Let's be terrifying and complicated together. The week before Christmas, Vanessa officially moved to Seattle. Mason couldn't be there for the actual move. Tommy had his winter concert, and he'd already missed too many school events. But he called that night, video chatting, while Vanessa stood in her new apartment surrounded by boxes. It's very empty, she said, panning the phone around. You'll make it home. Will I? I'm not great at the whole homemaking thing. My San Francisco place looked like a hotel. Then don't make it look like home. Make it look like you. She smiled at that. How was Tommy's concert? He sang so loud, I think he might have damaged Mrs. Henderson's hearing. She was standing right next to him. I'm sorry I missed it. Me too, but there'll be others. There was a knock on Vanessa's door. She opened it to reveal a delivery guy with approximately 15 pizza boxes. Vanessa Hale? That's me. Someone named Mason ordered these. Said you probably forget to eat while unpacking. Mason watched through the phone as Vanessa's face did something complicated. She tipped the delivery guy, brought the pizzas inside, and just stood there looking at them. You ordered me 15 pizzas? The website said they freeze well, and I know you. You'll work through dinner if you're not careful. This is insane. This is dinner for the next 2 weeks. Vanessa set the phone down, and for a moment Mason could only see her ceiling. Then she picked it back up, and her eyes were bright with tears. I don't deserve you, she said. Yeah, you do. You deserve someone who makes sure you eat. You deserve someone who shows up, even from 3 hours away. He paused. You deserve to be loved, Vanessa. Completely. Even the parts of you that forget to eat and work too hard and can't make dinosaur sounds. I love you. The words came out rushed, like she'd been holding them back. I should have said it before now. I should have said it 100 times already. But I love you, Mason. So much it scares me. Mason's throat tightened. I love you too. Have since I was 15 and you were the smartest person in every room. They stayed on the video call for another hour, Mason in his bedroom while Vanessa unpacked boxes and ate pizza. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. It was them figuring out how to be together even when they were apart. After they finally hung up, Mason sat in the dark thinking about the strange shape his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been going through the motions. Work, Tommy, sleep, repeat. Comfortable in his sadness, safe in his routine. And then Vanessa's car had broken down in the rain, and everything had changed. He wasn't sure yet if it was the right kind of change, wasn't sure if they could actually make this work long term. But for the first time in years, he was excited to find out. Christmas morning hit Ashford with the kind of snow that looked perfect in movies and made actual driving a nightmare. Mason woke up to Tommy jumping on his bed at what his phone informed him was 5:47 in the morning. "Dad, Dad, it snowed and Santa came and there's presents and can we open them now?" "Tommy, it's not even 6, but it's Christmas." From down the hall, Sarah's muffled voice. "If you wake me up before 7 on my day off, I'm disowning both of you." Mason groaned and pulled Tommy under the covers in a wrestling move that made his son shriek with laughter. 30 more minutes, then we can go see what Santa brought. That's forever. That's half a cartoon episode. Tommy considered this logic and apparently found it acceptable. He burrowed into the blankets next to Mason, vibrating with barely contained energy. "Is Vanessa coming today?" Mason's chest tightened. They'd talked about this. Vanessa had wanted to come, had tried to rearrange her schedule, but her sister, a half-sister from her father's first marriage that Mason had only recently learned existed, had guilted her into flying to Denver for Christmas. "She can't make it, buddy. Family stuff." "But we're family too now, right?" The question hit harder than it should have. "It's complicated. You always say that when you don't want to explain things. You're too smart for 6. "I know." They opened presents at 7, Sarah appearing in her bathrobe looking considerably less murderous than she'd sounded earlier. Tommy tore through his gifts with the focused intensity of someone on a mission. Dinosaur books, new Legos, the remote control car he'd been asking for since October. Mason's phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa with a photo of her in what looked like a very formal living room, wearing a dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Merry Christmas. Currently being interrogated about why I'm still single at 30. How's your morning?" He sent back a photo of Tommy surrounded by wrapping paper carnage. "Better than yours, apparently. You okay?" "Define okay." "I'm drinking mimosas at 9 a.m., and my sister just asked if I'm gay because why else would I not have found another husband yet?" "What did you say?" "That I'm in a relationship. She asked who with. I said a mechanic from my hometown." She laughed. "Thought I was joking." Mason stared at the phone, something cold settling in his stomach. And I let her think I was joking because explaining us is more complicated than I can handle before noon. He didn't respond right away. Couldn't. Because that was the reality of this, wasn't it? To Vanessa's world, her sister, her colleagues, probably most people who knew her, Mason was a complication. The mechanic from a small town who didn't fit into her real life. Another text came through. "I'm sorry. That sounded terrible. I just meant it's hard to explain when we're still figuring it out ourselves." "I get it. Do you? Because I feel like I just screwed up. We'll talk later. Enjoy your family time." "Mason." He muted his phone and shoved it in his pocket. Sarah was watching him with that expression that meant she'd clocked the whole conversation without needing to see the screen. "Everything okay?" "Fine. You're a terrible liar. Can we not do this right now? It's Christmas." Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded. "Okay, but we're talking about it later." They spent the morning in the comfortable chaos of present opening and breakfast making. Tommy's excitement was infectious enough that Mason could almost forget the weird hollow feeling in his chest. Almost. Around noon, his phone rang. Vanessa, not texting. He stepped out onto the porch to answer, the cold biting through his sweater immediately. "Hey." "I'm sorry." Her voice was rough. "What I said was awful and dismissive and exactly the kind of thing that makes you think this isn't real for me. Is it real for you?" "What?" "This. Us. Because from here it feels like I'm this secret you keep from your actual life. The thing you do on weekends when you're slumming it in small-town America. That's not fair. Isn't it? You couldn't even tell your sister about me. About us." Silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. "You're right. It's not fair. I got defensive because Melissa makes me feel like I'm failing at being a person, and I took it out on you." A pause. "But you're wrong about one thing. This isn't my weekend hobby. This is the only part of my life that feels real anymore." Mason leaned against the porch railing, watching his breath fog in the cold air. "Then why hide it?" "Because the second I make it public, it becomes everyone else's business. Melissa will have opinions. The board will have concerns about my focus. The tech press will write articles about how Vanessa Hale is dating some guy from Nowheresville. Her voice cracked. And I'm terrified that all that outside pressure will break what we're building before we figure out if it can actually work. So what? We just stay a secret forever? No. I don't know. Maybe until we're more solid. She made a frustrated sound. I'm handling this wrong. I know I am. But I don't know the right way to handle falling in love with someone whose life doesn't overlap with mine at all. Mason closed his eyes. I'm not asking you to put us on the cover of Forbes. I'm asking you to not pretend I don't exist when it's inconvenient. You're right. You're completely right. Vanessa's voice was steadier now. After New Year's, I'm telling people, the board, my friends, everyone who matters, no more hiding. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because you deserve better than being my secret, and I deserve to stop being so terrified of what people think. They talked for another 20 minutes, working through the hurt and misunderstanding until they found their way back to okay. Not perfect, but okay. When Mason went back inside, Tommy was building something elaborate with his new Legos, and Sarah was pointedly not asking questions. We're good, Mason said quietly. Yeah? Getting there. The week between Christmas and New Year's felt like existing in a weird limbo. Vanessa was still in Denver, Mason was buried in end-of-year garage paperwork, and Tommy was on winter break, which meant constant demands for entertainment. Mason took him ice skating at the outdoor rink downtown, where Tommy spent more time falling than skating and loved every second of it. They built a snowman that looked vaguely drunk. They watched so many dinosaur documentaries that Mason could now identify a Parasaurolophus on sight. And every night, he and Vanessa talked on the phone, sometimes about nothing. What Tommy had done that day, what crisis Vanessa had managed at the Seattle office remotely. Sometimes about everything, their fears, their hopes, the thousand small ways they were trying to build something neither of them quite knew how to name. New Year's Eve, Vanessa drove down from Seattle. She'd been back at her apartment for 2 days, drowning in office setup and hiring decisions. But she'd promised to be in Ashford for midnight. She arrived at 8, looking exhausted and beautiful, carrying a bag that suggested she'd packed for more than just overnight. Hi, she said when Mason opened the door. Hi yourself. Tommy barreled past Mason, wrapping his arms around Vanessa's waist. You're here. Aunt Sarah said you might not make it. I made it. Wouldn't miss it. She looked at Mason over Tommy's head. We good? We're good. They decided on a quiet New Year's type. No parties, no crowds, just the 4 of them and whatever movie Tommy picked. He chose something animated involving talking animals and a suspiciously convenient message about family. Halfway through, Tommy fell asleep on the couch between Mason and Vanessa, snoring softly. Sarah grinned and carefully extracted him, carrying him upstairs to bed. I'll be in my room, she called down. Try not to make too much noise when midnight hits. And then it was just Mason and Vanessa, sitting close on the worn couch, the TV playing to an audience that had stopped watching. I told Melissa about you, Vanessa said suddenly. Mason turned to look at her. When? Yesterday. Called her after we talked Christmas morning. Told her I was seeing someone serious, that he lived in Ashford, that I was moving my whole life around to make it work. What did she say? That I was being impulsive, that I barely knew you, that this was typical Vanessa, throwing myself into something without thinking it through. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Then she asked if you were after my money. Mason felt something cold slide through him. What did you tell her? That she doesn't know you, doesn't know us, and if she can't be supportive, she can keep her opinions to herself. Vanessa took his hand. Then I hung up on her. We haven't spoken since. Vanessa, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. Because she was wrong and I was tired of letting her make me feel small. She shifted to face him fully. I also told my CFO and my assistant, and I'm telling the board next week at our quarterly meeting. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. No more hiding, no more pretending you're not the most important person in my life outside of work. She squeezed his hand. I'm terrified they'll all think I'm making a huge mistake. But I'm more terrified of losing you because I was too scared to claim this publicly. Mason pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and the faint scent of coffee that seemed permanently attached to her. For the record, I don't care about your money. I know. I'd love you if you were broke and living in a studio apartment. I know that too. And your sister sounds exhausting. Vanessa laughed against his chest. She really is. They sat there in comfortable silence, the TV still playing its forgotten movie, the clock ticking toward midnight. Outside, someone was already setting off fireworks, jumping the gun on celebration. Can I ask you something? Mason said. Anything. Where do you see this going? Like, actually. Because we're 8 months in and we're still doing the long distance thing, still figuring out logistics weekend by weekend. Vanessa pulled back to look at him. Honestly? I don't know. I want to say I'll eventually move here, be with you and Tommy full time. But I also can't imagine walking away from TechVance, from everything I've built. She paused. What do you want? Mason had been thinking about this for weeks. Months, really? Ever since that first night in the garage. I want you happy. If that means running your company from Seattle and coming here when you can, okay. If it means something else, we figure it out. He traced patterns on her hand with his thumb. I spent 5 years after Jen died just existing. Going through motions, raising Tommy, fixing cars. Safe and numb and absolutely sure I'd never feel anything again. And now? Now I'm terrified and hopeful and completely out of my depth. But I'm alive again. Because of you. He met her eyes. So whatever this becomes, however we make it work, I'm in. Completely. Vanessa kissed him as the TV announced it was 30 seconds to midnight. Somewhere in the distance, more fireworks, more celebration, more people counting down to a new year that promised nothing but the chance to try again. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too. Even though I'm a disaster who works too much and can't make dinosaur sounds? Especially because of that. The TV hit 0. Outside, the fireworks intensified, the whole town apparently determined to make as much noise as possible. And Mason kissed Vanessa like it was the only thing that mattered, because in that moment, it was. The new year started with a crisis that had nothing to do with their relationship and everything to do with Mason's garage. The ancient furnace that had been threatening to die for 2 winters finally made good on its promise, giving up completely during the coldest week of January. Mason stood in the garage at 7 in the morning, breath fogging, staring at the dead furnace like he could will it back to life through sheer frustration. How much? Jake asked, having shown up early for his shift. To replace? $8,000 minimum. To repair? Maybe 3, but it'll die again in 6 months. You have $8,000? Mason laughed, the sound hollow. I have $1,200 in the business account, and Tommy needs new shoes because he won't stop growing. So what are you going to do? Work in a coat and pray we don't lose all our customers to shops with functional heating. He called Vanessa that night, trying to keep the stress out of his voice and failing completely. The furnace died. Can you fix it? Not without money I don't have. Silence on the other end, then carefully. I could help. No. Mason, I'm not taking your money. We've been over this. It's not about taking my money. It's about accepting help when you need it. From my girlfriend who's a billionaire? Yeah, that's not complicated at all. He rubbed his face, exhausted. I appreciate it, really, but I need to figure this out myself. Why? Why do you need to struggle when there's a solution right here? Because the second I start depending on your money, everything changes. I become the guy who's with you for what you can provide, and I can't live with that. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. That's not what it would mean. To you, maybe, but to everyone else? To your sister who already thinks I'm after your money? To the people in this town who'll say I'm using you? Mason shook his head even though she couldn't see it. I can't do it, Vanessa. I need to solve my own problems. Even if solving them means making everything harder than it needs to be? Even then. She didn't push, but he could hear the frustration in her voice when they said goodnight. And he couldn't blame her. From her perspective, she was offering a simple solution to a problem that was derailing his business. But from his, accepting that solution meant crossing a line he wasn't ready to cross. The next week was brutal. Working in a freezing garage, losing 2 customers to competitors with heat, watching his margins get thinner. Mason applied for a business loan and got rejected. Credit wasn't good enough, revenue too inconsistent. He was seriously considering selling his truck to cover a new furnace when Jake pulled him aside on Friday. Don't freak out, but I might have a solution. I'm already freaking out. My uncle owns a heating company. He's got a used furnace from a restaurant renovation. Barely 2 years old, fully functional. He'll sell it to you for 2 grand and install it for another 500. Mason did the math. Still more than he had, but manageable if he dipped into his personal savings. The savings he'd been keeping for emergencies, for Tommy's future, for the inevitable disasters that came with single parenthood. Tell him I'll take it. The furnace was installed by Wednesday. The garage was warm for the first time in 2 weeks, and Mason's bank account was significantly lighter. But he'd done it himself. Solved his own problem without becoming dependent on Vanessa's money. He told her about it that night, expecting her to be proud or at least understanding. Instead, she was quiet. You almost went broke rather than accept my help. I handled it. Barely. Jake told me you sold your emergency fund. Jake needs to mind his business. Mason, this is ridiculous. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and you're over there choosing between heat and your kid's college fund. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Because from here it looks like pride. Stupid, masculine pride that's making both our lives harder than they need to be. Mason felt anger flare, sharp and defensive. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Everyone already thinks I'm with you because you're rich and successful, and I'm some townie who got lucky. If I start taking your money, they're right. I become exactly what they think I am. Who cares what they think? I care. I care that Tommy grows up knowing his dad wasn't a charity case. I care that when we're together, it's because we love each other, not because you're bankrolling my life. Vanessa's voice went cold. You think I'd do that? Bankroll you like you're some kind of kept man? I think the power imbalance is already massive. You can buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. And I'm over here rationing heating oil. Adding your money into that mix just makes it worse. So what? We just pretend I'm not wealthy? Ignore the elephant in the room forever? I don't know. I don't have answers, Vanessa. I'm just trying to maintain some dignity here. They didn't exactly fight, but the conversation ended strained and uncomfortable. Mason lay in bed that night thinking about power dynamics and pride, and whether he was being practical or just stubborn. Sarah found him the next morning staring blankly at his coffee. You look terrible. Thanks. Vanessa? We're fine, just disagreeing about money stuff. Sarah sat down across from him. Let me guess. She offered to help with the furnace, and you said no. How does everyone know my business? Small town. Also, Jake can't keep his mouth shut. She sipped her own coffee. You're being an idiot, you know. Not you too. Listen, I get the pride thing. I get wanting to stand on your own. But you're letting your ego hurt your business and your relationship. It's not about ego. It's absolutely about ego. You'd rather struggle and stress and potentially lose customers than accept help from someone who loves you and has the means to give it. Sarah leaned forward. That's not noble, Mason. That's self-destructive. You don't understand the position it puts me in. I understand you're so busy protecting yourself from what other people might think that you're pushing away the best thing that's happened to you in years. Mason wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat, because maybe Sarah was right. Maybe he was so focused on not being the guy who needed Vanessa's money that he was becoming the guy who couldn't accept any help at all. He called Vanessa that afternoon. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. About last night, about being stubborn and proud and making this harder than it needs to be. I'm sorry too, I shouldn't have pushed. This is your business, your life. You get to make decisions about it. Yeah, but you're part of my life now, which means your input matters. I can't just shut you out when things get complicated. Vanessa sighed, and he could picture her running her hand through her hair the way she did when she was stressed. We're really bad at this. At what? Navigating the money thing. My ex-husband resented my success. You won't accept help because of it. I don't know how to just be wealthy without it becoming this massive issue. Maybe we need ground rules, Mason suggested. Clear boundaries about when help is okay and when it crosses a line. Like what? They spent the next hour talking it through. Emergency help, medical, safety-related, true crisis, was always acceptable. Business investments were complicated and needed individual discussion. Gifts were okay within reason. Lifestyle inflation because she could afford it was a no. It wasn't perfect. There were gray areas and potential conflicts, but it was a start, a framework for navigating one of the biggest obstacles between them. I still think you should have let me help with the furnace, Vanessa said at the end. I still think I made the right call, but next time I'll at least discuss it with you first. That's all I'm asking. February brought Tommy's 7th birthday and the first real test of their ground rules. Tommy wanted a birthday party at the new trampoline park in the next town over. $50 per kid, 15 kids invited, plus food and cake. Mason did the math and felt sick. $750 for a birthday party. Maybe we do something at home instead, he suggested to Tommy. Invite a few friends, pizza and cake, play some games. Tommy's face fell. But everyone goes to Sky Zone for birthdays. Jessica had hers there, and Marcus and even Emily, who's gross. I know, buddy, but it's expensive. Is it because we don't have enough money? The question hit like a punch. We have enough money. I just think there are better ways to spend it. Like what? Mason didn't have a good answer. Tommy was 7. He didn't care about savings accounts or practical spending. He cared about trampolines and friends and having a birthday party that didn't make him the weird kid whose dad was too cheap for Sky Zone. That night he mentioned it to Vanessa during their call. Let me pay for it, she said immediately. Vanessa, hear me out. This isn't about the furnace or your business. This is about Tommy having a birthday party with his friends. That's a gift category, not a bailout. $750 is a hell of a gift. It's nothing to me, less than nothing, and it would make Tommy happy. She paused. Our ground rules said gifts were okay within reason. Is this unreasonable? Mason thought about Tommy's face, about the quiet disappointment he'd tried to hide, about being the kid who couldn't afford what everyone else had, who grew up feeling less than because money was always tight. Okay, he said finally, but we tell Tommy it's from both of us. Not just you swooping in to save the day. Deal. The party was chaos. 15 7-year-olds on trampolines was apparently a recipe for noise complaints and minor injuries. But Tommy was ecstatic, bouncing with his friends and eating pizza and opening presents with the kind of joy that made everything worth it. Mason watched from the side next to Vanessa, who'd driven down that morning specifically for this. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For making this happen. For caring about Tommy enough to want him to have this. Vanessa leaned against him. He's a great kid. Of course I care. You know, he asked me last week if you were going to be his new mom. She stiffened slightly. What did you say? That it's complicated and we're taking things slow. Then he asked if slow meant you'd definitely be his mom eventually, or maybe not. Mason glanced at her. I didn't know how to answer that. What do you want the answer to be? It was the question underneath all their other questions, the one they'd been dancing around for months. Honestly, I want you here. Not just weekends, not just visits. I want you in our lives completely. You and me and Tommy figuring out how to be a family. He took a breath. But I also know that might not be realistic given everything else. Vanessa was quiet, watching Tommy attempt a backflip and nearly take out another kid in the process. I've been thinking about something, she said finally. The Seattle office is stable now. I've got good people hired, systems in place. I don't need to be there every day anymore. Mason's heart rate picked up. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I could split my time differently. 3 days in Seattle, 4 here, or some variation that makes sense. She looked at him. I can't leave Tech Vance. It's too important to me, too much a part of who I am. But maybe I don't have to choose between my work and my life anymore. Maybe I can have both. You'd really do that? Commute between cities, live out of a suitcase half the week? I've been living out of a suitcase for 10 years. At least this way I'd have a reason beyond board meetings and profit margins. She took his hand. I can't promise it'll be easy. I'll still travel for work, still have crazy weeks where I'm barely present. But I want to try. I want to be here for the birthday parties and the school plays and the random Tuesday nights. Mason pulled her close, right there in the middle of a trampoline park with screaming children and pepperoni pizza smell everywhere. I love you, he said into her hair. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and won't let me buy you a new truck. My truck runs fine. Your truck sounds like it's actively dying. That's just its personality. They stood there holding each other while Tommy and his friends created beautiful chaos. And for the first time in months, Mason let himself believe this might actually work. Not perfectly, not without problems, but work nonetheless. Later that night, after the party was over and Tommy was asleep still wearing his birthday crown, Mason and Vanessa sat on the porch despite the February cold. "I told the board today," Vanessa said. "About us." "How'd that go?" Mixed reactions. Half of them thought it was sweet. The other half worried about my focus. My CFO asked if this meant I was stepping back from daily operations. She laughed humorlessly. Like falling in love somehow makes me incapable of running a company. "What did you tell them?" "That my personal life was personal and my professional performance spoke for itself." Then I reminded them that TechVance hit record profits last quarter despite me taking weekends off. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I also told them I'd be splitting time between Seattle and Ashford going forward. That went over about as well as you'd expect. They can't fire you. You own the company. No, but they can make my life difficult. Question my decisions, slow down approvals, generally be passive-aggressive about the whole thing. Is it worth it? All the hassle and judgment and complications? Vanessa turned to look at him, her green eyes serious in the porch light. "You're asking if you're worth it?" "I guess I am." "Then yes. Absolutely yes. You and Tommy and this weird little life we're building together is worth every difficult board meeting and every judgmental comment." She kissed him softly. "I've spent my whole life making choices based on what was practical or profitable or sensible. This is the first time I've chosen something just because it makes me happy." Mason held her tighter, thinking about all the ways their lives didn't fit together, and all the ways they were forcing them to anyway. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic solution that made the distance disappear or the complications evaporate. But there was this. Two people who'd spent 17 years apart, deciding that together was worth fighting for, worth rearranging lives for, worth believing in despite the odds. And maybe that was enough. Spring came to Ashford the way it always did. Slowly, reluctantly, like it wasn't quite sure winter had actually left. Mason was replacing brake pads on a Subaru when Vanessa's car pulled into the garage on a Thursday afternoon, which was wrong because she wasn't supposed to be there until Friday night. He rolled out from under the car, wiping grease on his coveralls, and found her standing there with an expression he couldn't read. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong. I just needed to see you." She looked around the garage at the organized chaos of tools and parts and projects in various states of completion. "Can we talk?" Mason's stomach dropped. In his experience, "can we talk" never preceded good news. "Yeah, let me just finish this brake job and now Mason, we need to talk now." He told Jake to finish the Subaru, washed his hands in the industrial sink that never quite got them clean, and followed Vanessa out to her car. She didn't speak until they were inside, doors closed, the garage sounds muffled. "I got an offer," she said. "What kind of offer?" "To sell TechVance, a tech conglomerate out of Austin. They've been circling for months, but today they put actual numbers on the table." She turned to face him. $3.2 billion. Mason's brain stuttered on the number. He'd known Vanessa was wealthy, known her company was successful, but hearing an actual figure made it real in a way that magazine covers never had. That's a lot of money." "It's an obscene amount of money." Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. "More than I ever imagined when I started TechVance in my MIT dorm room. Generational wealth. Never work again money." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it. They want an answer by next month." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "I've been driving for 3 hours trying to figure out what I actually want." Mason reached over, pulled her hands away from her face. "What do you want?" "That's the thing. 6 months ago, the answer would have been easy. TechVance is my life, my identity, the thing I'm most proud of. Selling would have felt like giving up." She met his eyes. "But now I don't know. Because I'm so tired, Mason. I'm tired of board meetings and investor calls and being responsible for 3,000 employees. I'm tired of splitting myself between Seattle and here and never feeling like I'm doing either one right." "You're doing fine." "Am I?" "Because Tommy asked me last week what my favorite dinosaur was, and I couldn't answer because I'd been on conference calls all morning and my brain was completely fried. And I missed his spring concert because a client crisis came up. And I keep telling myself, I'm making it work, but I'm not. Not really. I'm just exhausted all the time." Mason had noticed. The dark circles under her eyes, the way she sometimes zoned out mid-conversation, the night she stayed up until 2 a.m. answering emails. He told himself it was temporary, that she'd find a balance eventually. But what if there was no balance to find? If you sold, he said carefully, what would you do? I don't know. That's what terrifies me. Tech Vance has been my entire adult life. I don't know who I am without it. She twisted her hands together. The rational part of my brain says, take the money, step away, figure out what actually matters. But the scared part thinks I'll lose my purpose, lose myself, become someone who just exists instead of builds. You could start something new, smaller, more manageable. Maybe. Or maybe I just need to admit that I can't have it all. The empire and the relationship and the family life. Maybe something has to give. Mason's chest tightened. Are you saying? No, God, no. Vanessa grabbed his hand. I'm not choosing between you and Tech Vance. I'm trying to figure out if there's a version of my life where I get to be happy instead of just successful. They sat there in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. $3.2 billion. The kind of money that solved every practical problem, that made distance and logistics and splitting time between cities irrelevant. But it also meant Vanessa giving up the thing she'd built, the identity she'd constructed, the purpose that had driven her for a decade. You don't have to decide today, Mason said finally. Take the month. Think about it. Figure out what you actually want, not what you think you should want. What if what I want is impossible? What if I want to keep Tech Vance and also be here for Tommy's dinosaur facts and random Tuesday nights with you? Then we figure out how to make impossible work. We've been doing it for months already. Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you for saying that, but we both know it's not sustainable. Something's going to break eventually. Mason didn't argue because she was right. They were holding together through sheer determination and hope, but the cracks were showing. Missed events, exhausted phone calls, the constant weight of logistics and distance and never quite enough time. Stay tonight, he said, instead of addressing the larger question. Stay and have dinner with us, and play dinosaurs with Tommy, and just be here. Don't think about Austin or offers or what happens next month. Just be here now. Okay, Vanessa whispered, just for tonight. But the offer hung over them like weather moving in. That night at dinner, Tommy chattered about his field trip to the Natural History Museum, while Vanessa smiled and nodded, and Mason could see her mind elsewhere. After Tommy went to bed, she pulled out her laptop and spent 2 hours on a video call with her leadership team, discussing the pros and cons of accepting. Mason listened from the kitchen, hearing the exhaustion in her voice, the way she kept circling back to the same concerns. What happens to the employees? Whether the acquiring company would maintain Tech Vance's culture? If selling meant she was giving up or finally choosing herself? When she finally closed the laptop, it was past 11 and she looked completely drained. Come to bed, Mason said. I need to review the full offer documentation. There are tax implications and earn-out structures and, Vanessa, come to bed. She came, but he could feel the tension in her body, the way her mind wouldn't shut off. They lay in the dark and Mason held her while she stared at the ceiling. What would you do? She asked quietly. If someone offered you $3 billion to walk away from the garage, Mason thought about it. The garage isn't the same thing. It's not worth $3 billion, and I didn't build it from nothing. I inherited it from my dad. But if it was comparable, if selling meant financial security forever but losing the thing you've built your life around, I'd probably take it, because the garage is a job, not my identity. I love it, but it's not who I am. He paused. But that's me. You're different. Tech Vance isn't just your job. No, it's my proof that I matter, that the weird girl from the small town became someone significant. Her voice cracked slightly. And I'm terrified that without it, I'm just nothing. You're not nothing. You're brilliant and driven and terrible at dinosaur sounds. You're the person who plays Legos with my son and argues with me about money and makes me feel alive for the first time in years. That doesn't go away if you sell your company, doesn't it? Because all of those things are new. Tech Vance is who I've been for a decade. I don't know how to separate myself from it. Mason didn't have an answer for that, so he just held her and hoped it was enough. The next few weeks were tense in ways that had nothing to do with them, and everything to do with the decision hanging over Vanessa's head. She flew back and forth between Seattle and Ashford more than usual, squeezing in time between meetings with lawyers and accountants and the acquisition team from Austin. Mason watched her burn herself out and felt helpless to stop it. You need to make a decision, Sarah said one night after Vanessa had fallen asleep on the couch, mid-conversation, laptop still open on her chest. It's not my decision to make. No, but you can tell her what you actually think instead of just being supportive. She needs honesty, not agreement. What am I supposed to say? Sell your billion-dollar company so you can live in my house and play happy family? How about, I want you happy more than I want you here? How about, watching you kill yourself, trying to do everything is breaking my heart? Sarah looked at Vanessa's sleeping form. She's drowning, Mason, and you're so busy being understanding that you're not throwing her a rope. That conversation echoed in Mason's head for days. Was he being supportive or enabling? Was he giving Vanessa space to decide or just avoiding the hard conversation because he was terrified of the answer? 2 weeks before the deadline, Vanessa showed up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. Mason was doing inventory when she walked into the garage looking like she hadn't slept in days. I need you to be honest with me, she said without preamble. About what? About what you want, not what you think I want to hear, not the supportive boyfriend answer. What do you actually want from this relationship? Mason set down his clipboard. Where's this coming from? I've spent 3 weeks talking to lawyers and accountants and board members about this offer. Everyone has an opinion about what I should do, but the only person whose opinion actually matters keeps telling me whatever I decide is fine. She crossed her arms. So I'm asking directly. Do you want me to sell Tech Vance and move here? Yes or no? The question was a trap. Mason could see it clearly. Say yes, and he was asking her to give up her identity for him. Say no, and he was telling her the relationship wasn't worth her sacrifice. I want you to be happy, he said. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. I want you happy more than I want you here full time. I want you excited about your life instead of exhausted by it. I want you to wake up feeling like you're living instead of just surviving. And if those things are mutually exclusive, if I can't be happy and be with you, Mason felt something crack in his chest. Then I guess we figure out what that means. You're still not answering the question. Because there's no good answer, Vanessa. Yes, I want you here. Yes, I want to build a life together and watch you be there for Tommy's milestones and have normal dinners and everything that comes with actually being together. But not if it means you resenting me for asking you to give up everything you've built. Not if it means watching you lose yourself because you chose me over your company. So what? We just stay in this limbo forever? You and Ashford, me splitting time badly, both of us pretending this is sustainable? I don't know. I don't have a perfect solution. All I know is I love you, and I want you in my life, and I'm terrified that no matter what you choose, someone ends up miserable. They stared at each other across the garage, years of unspoken fears finally surfacing. I'm selling it, Vanessa said suddenly. Mason's heart stopped. What? I'm accepting the offer. I already told my CFO this morning. She laughed, shaky and slightly unhinged. $3.2 billion, and I'm walking away. Vanessa, I can't do this anymore, Mason. The constant travel, the stress, the feeling like I'm failing at everything because I'm spread too thin. I'm 33 years old and I'm so tired I can barely think straight. Something has to give, and it can't be this. It can't be us. You can't make this decision because of me. I'm not. I'm making it because of me. Because I want a life that isn't just board meetings and profit margins. Because I want to wake up next to you and make Tommy terrible pancakes and maybe figure out who I am when I'm not CEO of Tech Vance. Tears were streaming down her face now. And I'm terrified I'm making a huge mistake. But I'm more terrified of looking back in 20 years and realizing I chose success over actually living. Mason crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. She was shaking, crying hard into his chest, and he just held her while she fell apart. What if I regret it? She whispered. What if I sell and then hate my life and resent you for it? Then we deal with it, together. But Vanessa, you can't keep going like this. Even if you stayed with Tech Vance, even if we ended, you'd still need to make a change. This isn't about me. This is about you being human instead of a machine. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. The deal closes in 60 days. After that, I'm unemployed for the first time since college. You're not unemployed. You're retired at 33 with more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. I don't know how to be retired. Then we'll figure it out together. The next 2 months were chaos. Vanessa had to stay in Seattle for most of it, working through the acquisition process and transition planning. Mason ran the garage and took care of Tommy and tried not to think about all the ways this could still fall apart. They talked every night, sometimes about the acquisition details, sometimes about what came after. Vanessa was thinking about consulting, maybe teaching, possibly starting something smaller that didn't consume her entire life. Mason suggested she take a year off first, just breathe, but she laughed and said she didn't know how to do nothing. "You could learn," he'd said. "With you as my teacher?" "I'm excellent at doing nothing. It's my greatest skill." "You work 60 hours a week." "Okay, I'm terrible at it, but we can be terrible together." Tommy took the news that Vanessa was moving to Ashford with the casual acceptance of a 7-year-old who'd already incorporated her into his normal. "Is she going to live here?" he asked. "Eventually, we'll probably look for a bigger place once everything's settled." "Can we get a dog then?" "We've discussed the dog situation, but this is a new situation." The answer is still maybe. Sarah's reaction was more complicated. She pulled Mason aside the day after the deal officially closed, and Vanessa drove down with the first carload of her belongings. "You sure you know what you're doing?" Sarah asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "She just gave up $1 billion company to move here. That's a lot of pressure." "I know. If this doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out and we deal with it like adults." "But Sarah, I spent 5 years after Jen died, convinced I'd never feel anything again. And then Vanessa showed up and reminded me what it's like to actually want something. I'm not walking away from that because I'm scared of the what-ifs." Sarah hugged him hard. "Okay, but if you hurt each other, I reserve the right to say I told you so." "Deal." Vanessa moved in stages. First her clothes and personal items, then her furniture, most of which didn't fit Mason's small house and ended up in storage. Then the items she'd accumulated from her Seattle apartment and her San Francisco place before that, books and artwork, and the complicated coffee machine she swore she needed to function. Mason's house, which had been comfortably cluttered with just him and Tommy and Sarah, became legitimately crowded. "We need a bigger place," Vanessa said one night, standing in the living room surrounded by boxes. "Yeah, I've been looking." Mason pulled up listings on his phone. "There's a house on Oak Street, 4 bedrooms, needs work but the bones are good. It's in our price range if we pool resources." Vanessa looked at the listing, then at him. "Our price range? Like we're actually doing this. Aren't we?" "I don't know. Are we?" "Because we've never actually talked about what this looks like long term. We've been so focused on logistics and distance that we never discussed the actual relationship endgame." Mason set down his phone. "What do you want the endgame to be?" "Honestly, I want the house on Oak Street. I want to renovate it together and argue about paint colors and build something that's ours, not just yours or mine." She took his hand. "I want Tommy to have a yard for the dog we're probably going to get because I'm weak and he's very persuasive. I want to wake up next to you without it being a stolen weekend or a scheduled visit. I want boring and normal and everything I thought I'd never have." "That sounds perfect." "Even though I'll probably drive you crazy? I'm going to want to fix things and optimize systems and generally be intense about home improvement. Even though I'll teach you how to be lazy and you'll teach me whatever the opposite of lazy is." "Productive. The word you're looking for is productive." They bought the house on Oak Street in July. It needed everything: new roof, updated electrical, a kitchen that hadn't been touched since 1987. But it had 4 bedrooms and a yard and enough space for all of them to breathe. The renovation took 6 months and nearly broke them twice. Vanessa wanted to hire contractors for everything. Mason insisted they could do most of it themselves. They compromised by doing the work they could handle and hiring professionals for the things that required permits and actual expertise. "This is why couples divorce during renovations," Vanessa said one Saturday afternoon, covered in paint and furious about the uneven wall texture. "We're not even married. Good thing, because I might murder you over this wall." "The wall is fine." "The wall is lumpy." Tommy wandered through, tracking muddy footprints from the yard where he'd been helping by digging holes for plants. "Are you guys fighting?" "No," they said in unison. "Sounds like fighting." "We're having a spirited discussion about wall texture," Mason said. "That's adult fighting." Tommy shrugged and wandered back outside, clearly unbothered. Sarah, who'd been watching from the doorway, laughed. "He's not wrong." By Christmas, the house was livable. Not finished, but functional. They moved in officially on December 20th, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because the bedroom furniture hadn't been delivered yet. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa said, staring up at the ceiling. "I sold a company for $3 billion, and I'm sleeping on the floor." Character building. I have enough character. You can never have too much character. She rolled to face him, the streetlight through the bare window casting shadows across her face. "Are you happy?" "Yeah, are you?" "I think so. I'm still figuring out what happy feels like when it's not tied to quarterly earnings and market share." She paused. "But this feels right. Chaotic and messy and nothing like I planned, but right." Mason pulled her closer. "Nothing about us has gone according to plan." "No. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the best things don't come from careful planning. Maybe they come from broken cars and rainy nights and being stupid enough to try when everyone says it won't work." "Is that your way of saying you're glad your Mercedes broke down?" "I'm saying I'm glad I was brave enough to pull into your garage, even though I was terrified, even though it made no logical sense." She kissed him softly. "I'm saying sometimes the best decision is the one that feels impossible." They got married in April, small ceremony at the courthouse with just Sarah and Tommy and a few close friends. Vanessa wore a simple blue dress. Mason wore the suit Sarah had bought him for job interviews years ago that he'd never needed. Tommy carried the rings with the seriousness of someone entrusted with nuclear codes. "Do you take this woman?" the judge started. "Yes," Mason interrupted. "I haven't finished the question." "I know, but yes, to all of it. Whatever you're asking, yes." Vanessa laughed, tears streaming down her face. "That's not how this works." "It is now." The judge sighed but smiled. "All right then. Do you, Vanessa, take this very eager man?" "Yes. Absolutely yes." "You're supposed to wait for me to finish too." "Sorry, but also yes." They were pronounced married by a judge who seemed bemused by their inability to follow basic ceremony protocol. Tommy cheered, Sarah cried, and Mason kissed his wife in a courthouse that smelled like old coffee and possibility. The reception was at Angelo's because where else would they have it? The whole town showed up because small towns didn't need formal invitations to celebrate. Mrs. Patterson gave them a toaster. The mayor made a speech about young love that was wildly inaccurate given they were both in their 30s. Jake got drunk and told embarrassing high school stories that made Vanessa laugh until she couldn't breathe. "This is perfect," she said, leaning against Mason while Jake described the time Mason tried to fix the principal's car and somehow made it worse. "It's chaos. It's perfect chaos. Our chaos." Tommy tugged on Vanessa's dress. "Can I call you Mom now?" She crouched down, eyes shining. "Do you want to?" "Yeah, is that okay?" "That's more than okay. That's the best thing anyone's ever asked me." Mason watched his son hug his new wife and felt something in his chest expand so much it hurt. This was what he'd given up on after Jen died. The idea of family, of love, of building something with another person. He'd resigned himself to going through the motions. And then a car had broken down in the rain and everything had changed. A year later, Vanessa stood in their backyard watching Tommy play with the dog they'd finally gotten. A golden retriever puppy named Dr. Bones, who was currently destroying a garden gnome. "We should probably stop him," Mason said from the porch. "Probably, but it's funny. You paid $40 for that gnome." "Money well spent for this entertainment." Mason joined her on the grass. Their house stood behind them, finally finished after 18 months of renovations and arguments and small victories. It looked nothing like Vanessa's sleek Seattle apartment or Mason's cramped old place. It looked lived in and loved and completely theirs. "Do you miss it?" Mason asked. "Tech Vance? The CEO life? All of it?" Vanessa considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I miss the challenge, the feeling of building something significant. I miss my team and the problems we solved together." She paused. "But I don't miss the exhaustion. I don't miss feeling like I was always failing because I couldn't be everywhere at once. And I definitely don't miss spending holidays alone in hotel rooms." "You could start something new. You've gotten offers." "I know. And maybe someday I will. But right now, I'm teaching a business course at the community college and consulting for a few startups and actually sleeping through the night. That's enough." "Is it really?" She turned to face him fully. "I spent 17 years building an empire to prove I was worth something. to prove that the weird girl from the small town mattered, and I succeeded beyond anything I imagined. But you know what I learned? What? That success and worth aren't the same thing. I matter because of who I am, not what I built. I matter to you and Tommy and Sarah and the students in my class who are figuring out their own paths. She took his hand. I matter because I'm here, present, living my life instead of just achieving things. That's very profound. I know. I've been working on it. Tommy ran over, Dr. Bones bounding behind him. Mom! Dad! Dr. Bones ate the gnome's face. I saw, Vanessa said. That's coming out of your allowance. That's not fair. He's a puppy. He doesn't know better. Then you should have been watching him closer. But Dad said, Don't bring me into this, Mason said. Your mom's right. Tommy groaned dramatically and ran off, the face-eating puppy chasing behind him. That's the third thing he's destroyed this week, Vanessa said. Worth it? Completely worth it. They stood there in their backyard on a random Thursday afternoon, watching their son play with their badly behaved dog, and Mason thought about the strange path that had led them here. All the years apart, all the missed opportunities, all the ways they'd almost never happened. You know what's weird? He said. What? If your car hadn't broken down that night, we'd probably have never seen each other again. You'd still be running tech vans. I'd still be stuck in neutral. None of this would exist. Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder. Makes you think about how much of life is just timing and luck. Or fate. You believe in fate? I don't know. But I believe that some things are worth waiting 17 years for. Even if you didn't know you were waiting. She kissed him, soft and certain, tasting like coffee and the life they'd built from broken timing and second chances. I love you, she said, even though you're stubborn and your truck is held together with prayer and you still can't make a decent cup of coffee. I love you too, even though you're intense and you optimize everything and you're somehow worse at dinosaur sounds than when we started. Velociraptors are hard. They really aren't, Tommy called from across the yard, something about Dr. Bones in a mud puddle and needing help immediately. They went together, Vanessa laughing at Mason's resigned expression, and handled the crisis with the practiced teamwork of people who'd learned how to be partners through trial and error and refusing to give up when things got hard. Later that night, after Tommy was in bed and the mud-covered dog was sleeping in his crate, Mason and Vanessa sat on their porch watching the stars come out over Ashford. The same stars that had been there 17 years ago when two teenagers had been too scared to take a chance. You think we would have worked out back then? Vanessa asked. If one of us had been brave enough to say something in high school? Honestly, probably not. We were different people. We needed those 17 years to become who we are now. That's very mature of you. I have my moments. Rare, but appreciated. They sat in comfortable silence, and Mason thought about all the things that had to happen for them to end up here. Jen's death, Vanessa's divorce, the years of building separate lives that somehow made them ready for this one. It was painful and messy, and nothing he would have chosen if he'd known the cost. But it had led him here, to this porch, with this woman, in this life that was chaotic and imperfect and exactly what he needed. No regrets? He asked. Vanessa considered it seriously, the way she considered everything. I regret the years we lost. I regret that Jen had to die for us to find each other. I regret my failed marriage and your grief and all the pain that brought us to this point. But I don't regret us. I don't regret selling tech vans or moving here or choosing this life. Even with all the hard parts, all the compromises, all the ways it's not perfect. She turned to look at him. This is the first time in my adult life I felt like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That's not nothing. No, Mason agreed. That's everything. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove past, radio playing. Normal Thursday night sounds in a small town where nothing much ever happened and everything important did. And on a porch on Oak Street, two people who'd spent 17 years apart sat together in the dark, building a life from second chances and broken cars and the courage to choose love over logic. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more fights about wall texture and money and whose turn it was to deal with the dog's vet appointment. There would be hard days and doubts and moments when they both wondered if they'd made the right choice. But there would also be this. The quiet certainty of being with someone who knew you completely and chose you anyway. The joy of building something together, messy and imperfect and entirely their own. The understanding that sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that happen easily, but the ones that require you to be brave enough to try when everything says you shouldn't. Mason reached over and took Vanessa's hand, and she squeezed back without hesitation. They didn't need to say anything else. After everything they'd been through, all the words they'd spoken, and the silences they'd shared, some things didn't need explanation. They just needed to be lived. And so they did.